I'd like to give it another minute or two for Andy and Vince, if that's okay.
Am I chairing? Is Andrew here tonight?
I think he's supposed to be, but he's not here.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure he's going to be here.
Okay.
Yeah. I think it's only you and I, George, right now.
Oh, okay. I thought Dan.
Oh, wait,
Dan
Raj just got here.
I'm sure he's going to be.
Raj.
Is Raj here?
He just came.
Okay. Here come other people. I'm here. Just a notice from Andrew. Teams is not working for Andrew.
Well, it's not working for me. I didn't see this meeting on my team. I had to go through some roundabout way.
Yeah, so did I.
Greg just sent out another
Microsoft
link.
seems to be having some trouble.
Somebody dropped the ball. Fire them.
I
Microsoft.
believe there was an upgrade, so I wouldn't say that it was dropping the ball, but I think that there was an upgrade that some of us might not have been aware of.
Thanks.
I'm hanging your keys back up, okay?
I didn't mean it seriously. I was just joking.
All right. Well, I can, Elaine. I can share the meeting until Andrew gets here.
Sounds good.
Okay, because I think the rest of the trustees are here.
I'm hearing a lot of feedback. Can people who are not speaking please mute?
That is
Great.
a lot.
Much better. All right.
Yeah, I can't log into, if I logged out of this Teams, I can't, 4 different computers, I can't log into any of the 3 Microsoft accounts I have. Something's going on that doesn't seem to impact being logged in, but if you have to log in, that makes no sense though.
You know, Raj, now that I think about it, my work Microsoft booted me out late this afternoon, so maybe it's something on Microsoft's end.
That's what I'm thinking.
Yeah, okay. We want to give another minute for Andrew, George, or do you want to just get started?
I think it sounds. We should probably just get started. It sounds like he's in a little bit of a fight, so I'm not sure. It might be more than a minute.
And Greg, can I ask you to reach out to Andy and Vince, who are most likely having issues as well?
Yep, will do.
Thank you.
And Andrew sent me, I'm having issues with Teams.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You know, if you send him, I want to say he can join without authenticating, but maybe not.
Well, Greg sent a link out to everyone just before the meeting, and that's the one I used to connect. So hopefully that will be one that Andrew can use.
Cool.
All right. So in the meantime, understanding that we are experiencing technical difficulties, let's go ahead and convene. I will call the Town of Essex Select Board to order.
And I'll call the Village of Essex Junction Trustees to order.
Okay. Evan or Greg, are there agenda additions or changes?
We do have an addition for the select board, select board only. It's a discussion about personnel to go into executive session. So if that could be added as items 5A or 5H and 8A, and if the select board is able to stick around for a few minutes after the rest of the meeting, we can update you then.
Thank you, Greg.
Motion.
Sorry, sending tech support to Andrew here.
Hello, Andrew.
Then I will make a motion to approve the amended agenda.
We're trying to figure out what's going on. A few people have the same problem.
Thank you, Pat. Dawn, would you mind seconding the approval for the select board?
I second that.
Thank you. All those in favor, please say aye.
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 Thank you. Select board's all set.
Okay, same motion for the trustees. Anyone want to make a motion?
I moved.
Sure. So moved.
Okay, I think that was Dan. And
No,
second?
I'll second it.
Okay, Raj moved, Dan second. Okay, any further discussion? All in favor? Aye?
Aye.
Aye.
Okay, aye. There you go, Amber. Okay, great, thanks, we're good.
Okay. So now we'll move on to item 4, public to be heard. This is for folks who are wanting to speak to the select board or the trustees on items that are not on the agenda. And you can let us know that you wish to speak by a couple different ways. You can raise your hand. That you'll see a hand icon either at the upper right of your screen or in the center of your screen in your toolbar. Or you can indicate you wish to speak by saying you wish to speak in the chat. I think that would be our best bet because I cannot see people waving at the camera right now. And please understand we are dealing with what appears to be an upgrade to the system of Teams we're using. And so we're having a few issues. So please be patient. All right, I see a couple hands. Hang on a second. Let me get them up here. Okay, I'm going to go with Kathy Ainsworth first because she might have some technical things for us to talk about. And then Mike, I don't know what your last name is, Mike, so we need to know who that is. And then Lori Houghton. So Kathy, please let us know what you're thinking.
So I am also having some interesting upgrade changes to my screen. And I was wondering if the chat icon has been moved on anybody else's screen.
I see it now in the upper right corner. The menu bar, the toolbar that used to be in the center of the screen is now at the upper right. And so I see the chat icon there.
Okay, I will keep looking around. So thank you.
Okay.
Kathy, excuse me, mine's gone totally too. I have no chat
gone?
icon. Yeah.
Okay.
Okay.
Well, that's all right.
Hey, are you guys seeing the participants, the people icon at the top?
I can see the
I'm
participants.
I'm sort of seeing them.
Just to the right of that is the chat. It's a speech bubble.
Yeah, it used to be there. It's no longer there on my screen. It's participants, hand, and then more actions, but there's no chat option. So that's just I think I'm just gonna go without. So that's okay. Thank you.
Okay.
All right. So sorry for the confusion, folks. So we have a couple folks who want to speak. We're going to go with Mike and then Lori and then Margaret. Go ahead, Mike. And please identify yourself with your first and last name.
Sorry about that. This is Mike Sullivan. I have a suggestion. If people who are having trouble are using the apps for either the Mac or the Windows, is to just try to use a browser.
Mike, that's not working either.
Oh, okay. That's what I'm using, and I thought maybe the apps were not, but the browser was. I did have trouble a little bit signing in a couple of times, but after refreshing on the browser, it came up, and it's been fine since. That's all.
Okay. Thanks for the help there, Mike. Lori, go ahead, and then Margaret.
Hi, and I apologize if I'm echoey. This is Lori Houghton, 40 School Street. This is for the trustees and I don't need an answer, but I am just a bit concerned about what might be happening at the old smoke shop building. I apologize, I don't know the address, but I walk by there very often and it seems to be a business that is never opened. So I'm concerned and just wanted to throw that out there for the trustees.
Lori, the old which building? What are you talking?
Where the old smoke shop was on Railroad Ave.
Oh, okay.
Up in smoke. Where Up in Smoke was.
Up in Smoke. Thank you, Dan. Yes.
Okay, good. Yeah, we'll check it out. Thanks, Lori.
Okay. Margaret Smith, go ahead.
So just another addendum to the technical issues. I also do not have a chat button. I do see people and my toolbar is still in the bottom where it's always been. So.
Okay, thanks, Margaret. We're gonna really have to figure this out so we make it accessible for everybody. Okay, are there any other folks who want to speak, please raise your hand or put a comment in the chat if possible. Ken and then Betsy.
And can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Great. No chat for me also. I noticed this also last meeting. I reported it to Greg and he couldn't reproduce the problem. So I'm glad to hear other people are having it, I guess. I don't feel so alone. Thanks.
Thank you. Betsy?
I'm sorry, Lynn, I just joined the meeting. Are we talking about things that are not on the agenda right now?
Yes, that's where we are.
Oh, good, very good. I would like to ask that when we are doing the budget for next year, that we do not add into the budget as a item that we are counting on the penalties and fees that people have to pay for late taxes or for water bills or whatever, because that really hampers the Board of Civil Authority from being able to abate them, because then we're taking money from things that are already planned for. So I would seriously like you not to put that money that we get as something that you're counting on and is used for part of our budget. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Okay, Evan, is your hand up? I see Evan's hand up. Did you have something?
I think he's muted.
Yes.
Evan, you might be muted.
Not anymore.
Oh.
I'm trying to get a hold of Andrew and others in IT. Andrew's just having computer trouble. That's just not even letting him into any online. So right now, and he's leery of just calling in. And Andy is also having trouble.
Yeah.
So we're working through that. So I'm listening to you. So if you need something, just shout it out.
Okay.
And there's a couple people who are in the lobby who I've said they can be admitted, but the circle is just spinning.
Yeah,
so
I've
it's a
seen
very
that too.
interesting night.
Yes, it is indeed. I'm hoping we can maybe have a backup next time. So let's think about that.
Yeah,
Okay.
Not like we've got anything critical to look at
this
tonight.
is a OneNote. This is a Microsoft thing based on what I'm seeing at my work service tickets area.
Okay, so we're at Microsoft's mercy tonight.
It seems to be. It seems to be.
Okay, well, hopefully they'll work it out. Let's move on. Business item 5A, presentation and discussion of Village Town current budgetary funding analysis and estimated separation numbers. George, do you want to give a brief intro as to how this came about so that we have that established before we ask Sarah to make her presentation?
Sure. I think that over the course of the last year, in the context and in the framework of our merger discussions, it's come up that we wanted to understand the funding. You know, a lot of what we're doing with the merger plan is to ameliorate the impact of moving the village's expenditures into the town budget under a merger. And so that raised questions. Well, how much, what exactly would happen? Why is there a difference between village and town spending, and lots of questions. And so without going too much into it, a number of people sort of asked to see what exactly is the funding picture right now? Where does the money come from? Where does the money go? You know, the money specifically coming into the town budget, how much of it comes from the village, how much it comes from within the village, how much gets spent on town departments, village departments, and so forth. And then there was a group in the village that requested, I think it was a large group, and I'm not sure if Bridget is here, but it was Bridget and a number of other people, Bridget Meyer, who wanted some kind of a speculation of what would happen. What would the funding picture look like if the village and the town separated? How would that change things? How would that change our local finances? So we requested that Sarah do this, and it's a lot of work, and it calls for a lot of speculation. And I think Sarah will get into that because we don't, if we separated, it's sort of a catastrophic scenario and we don't really, it's really almost impossible to say exactly what it would look like. But I think Sarah did a really good job. Took her a long time, but I think she's finally got some solid numbers. She did have to make some assumptions that we may agree or not agree with, but we understood that that was what had to happen in order for her to complete this work. So with no further ado, I'll turn it over to Sarah for her to discuss. Thanks.
Thank you, George. Can I just make a housekeeping note? Everybody, if you're not speaking, please keep your microphone muted. And I see that there's two folks with their hands up in the audience, and so we'll take questions and comments at the after this presentation. So we'll just ask for your patience. Thank you. Sorry, Sarah, go ahead.
No, thanks, Elaine and George, and hi everybody. I think we'd have a full house if we were in person tonight. I want to take a moment to just acknowledge that there's been a lot of buildup to this, and that I'm hopeful that everybody listening now and anyone who might reference it in the future is willing to walk through this data with me and listen to what I have to say through the lens of curiosity. And then we can talk more about whether it meets our expectations or doesn't. What do we want to see from here? Where do we go? So that's my request of everyone tonight. I have a lot of information in this packet. I know a few times I heard requests to just put it on one page, a brief one-page summary. And I had to chuckle to myself when my brief 32 pages went into the packet. So I appreciate everyone taking the time to walk through all the data that I put together. I want to reiterate what George said to a small extent. The question, I looked at three things to start with. The first is where does the money come from? Where does it go? So in the current environment, how are things funded? How does that split up between the town budget, the village budget? And then from there, what does that translate into on the different tax bases, tax rate, different segments of town? Next, Greg, I'm not ready for that yet. Sorry. I can drive the screen. Thank you, though. Next up, I'm going to talk about, I went through and I looked at each of those budget segments just side by side, which I think is really where the meat of the presentation is, if you really want to get a view of the individual stories that are attached to each segment. And then lastly, I put together some separation numbers. So what I want to do tonight is I want to talk for a little bit. I want to talk about really 4 different things. First, I want to touch on some foundational topics with everybody to hopefully get us starting at the same place. And then I want to walk you through how to read the department by department side by side slides. I want to hit on 3 of them just to show some different examples. And then I want to move into separation. So first up, government's an interesting beast. I think we can all agree on that. And there are services in every local government that residents pay for, whether they use them directly or indirectly or not at all. Some of you might remember Pat Scheidel saying that government services are a little bit like an insurance policy. So police and fire are there when you need them, if you need them, but hopefully you won't need them. In my world, in the finance world, we call this a non-exchange transaction. So taxpayers pay taxes because they have to as tax-paying residents. And those taxes they don't pay them though based on their perceived value of received services. We pay them because we have a societal agreement that there are certain common goods that a government is best suited to fund. services that don't lend themselves well to for-profit supply and demand markets, which are exchange transaction, where the perceived value of what you receive is equal to the money that you put into it. So some people might look at this and feel like there are inherent inequities in property taxes, that they don't use the services that they have to pay for. But that is the nature of the non-exchange transaction as a baseline. But in addition to that, in our funding situation, there are other inequities that stem from the fact that the village is also part of the town, and therefore we have an overlapping tax base that is charged with these compulsory non-exchange transactions to fund common services. As I'm looking through the numbers, there are really two categories of these additional inequities. There's the one instance where village taxpayers pay for a service that they're not eligible to receive, and that's the town planning and zoning or town community development. And then in more situations, the village taxpayers pay a higher amount for equal access to services, which, when we think about some fundamental concepts of taxation, this would seem to violate the concept of uniformity, which states that similar properties must be assessed and taxed in a similar manner, unless there is a distinct basis for differentiation. And again, this stems from the fact that we have two separate municipalities and an overlapping tax base. So while we're not violating uniformity within either budget per se, when you look at the two together and how the village is impacted, it would seem that we are. And so paying more for equal access is happening in the budget segments that are not currently entirely funded through the town budget. So for example, the libraries, everybody has access to both library through the home card program, yet the village taxpayers are paying all of the cost of Brownell, plus their grand lists share the cost of Essex Free. Similar to fire, through mutual aid, everyone is benefited by the two fire departments. Are there any questions about anything I've just said before I start to share my screen from the board, sir? I'm gonna take that as a no. Thank you.
Great so far.
Okay. And I'm going to head into the next.
I have a question.
Betsy, this is a presentation for the boards, and we're going to open it up to the public as soon as she's done.
Oh, I thought she was saying no one had a question. Sorry.
Well,
sorry.
for the boards. This is all for the boards at the moment. Thanks.
Sorry.
All right. Okay. I'm going to start sharing my screen. Where'd that go? There it is. All right. I hope that you have all had a chance to read through or look through the document I provided. I know I had gotten some comments back from the board members. How do I make Teams work again? Okay, I can't see you guys anymore, but I can see my screen. So we're starting off, remember, on an analysis of what's happening now. And it was really, really important to me that we could all start from the same place, and that I wasn't just handing you numbers that had been adjusted or reconciled and asking you to just trust them. So I want to walk through some of these like big spreadsheets in the early part of the packet that seem like just a lot of numbers. And I want to point out, really, if you'll allow me, step by step, how I got from there to a basis for consistent examination. So I started with the voter approved budgets from FY20, they come straight out of the annual reports. So anybody with the annual report can pull it up and tie back to these numbers. This does include the extra $100,000 that was added to the highways budget in the town from the floor. It's the only difference between the published annual report and the numbers here. Because of the complex nature of the current financial relationship between the town and the village, there are some items that end up being double counted. They appear in both the village expenditure budget and in the town expenditure budget. So for example, highways, the village highway budget is under the budgetary control of the trustees. That's where it's set. And then through agreement with the town, that total dollar amount is then put also into the town budget to be funded on the larger town tax base. And then that money is transferred back in. In order to make all those mechanisms work, that village total dollar amount appears both in the village budget and in the town budget. That's the same way that the stormwater segments work. The village contribution toward the town, to the unified manager and HR, the library contribution, and a contribution toward the clerk. And so the first thing I did is I took what was in the annual reports, I removed anything that was double counted to get an adjusted total. From there, we move into reconciling the different budgetary bases of accounting. So each entity has evolved differently in how it budgets, and that has led to different methods of budgeting. There are no standards, there's no standard setting board for budgeting. So it really is a process and a document that just best suits the needs of its immediate users. There are the two main things that I want to touch on is that the village has a number of budget segments lumped into administration that the town has split out. And so I consolidated those all together in the town to create a new administration for the town so we could compare what's happening in the village administration segment to its equivalent in the town budget. The other big one is that in the town budget, each of the department segments has, or many of them, have their own operating transfer to capital, whereas in the village budget, that all happens in its own budget segment. So I've adjusted for that again, so we can have a consistent basis of accounting to look at these things side by side to really get an apples to apples comparison. From there, taxes are not the only thing that fund these services. Grant funds, user fees, and other income fund the services. So I've taken those out to look at what is the burden to the tax base of each of the services. And then from there, I've done a few things such as show you which budget this shows up in. Does it show up in the town budget or the village budget? How does that then translate into which segment of the tax base pays for how much? The total grand list last year was $46.5 million, $26.5 million. 42% of that is the village and 58% of that is the town. So when we look at things that are funded by tax dollars against the tax base, that's the split out there. The interesting thing that popped out here for me, and I knew this intellectually, it was in my brain, but when we talked earlier about how the village budgets for, so I think maybe administration is a better one here, because this is where the clerk, money for the clerk is. When we talk about the town budget transferring funds into the village budget, we know, but it's different to see that the village budget is the village tax base is paying 42% of that. So in some of these things, we get into a circular reference. Anyhow, I've been taking that and I've translated it into a tax rate and then shown it side by side. I really think if someone were looking for a one-page summary of who pays how much for what, it would be page 11 in the packet that I sent, which is table 5B. And what this does is alphabetically by budget segment, it shows the net amount of each budget segment funded with taxes, it splits it out by tax base, and then it recalculates an effective tax rate per taxpayer outside the village and inside the village. And so I think that this one is your best bet at a one-page summary. All right, that's enough of that piece. I want to just tell you how to read these department by department summaries, which start in segment 2. broken up by functions that are still separate and then consolidated functions. And I'm going to try to switch screens if I can. So each of these pages starts at the top with which budget segment it's referring to. And these are going to be the budget segments that I detailed out in slide 5B. It then goes in to a little bit of detail to try to tell the story about the budget segment in the town budget and in the village budget. There are some instances such as assessor, IT, police, where they only exist in one budget, and you'll see on those there's just one box at the top of the screen. That story, that narrative, then gets broken down into how do these things get funded. And just as we had seen in Table 5B and others earlier on, there are non-tax revenue sources and then taxpayer revenue sources, so tax dollars going to each of these budget segments, broken out here by the two different tax bases that we're looking at, the village grand list and the town outside the village grand list. Finally, on each of these pages at the bottom, there's a note about the effective tax rate. So in my mind, this is where we get to see really what the impact is on each of our taxpayers of these larger numbers and larger concepts. And I've translated that into a tax burden on a $280,000 home. All of these sheets have the current scenario and a merged scenario. And they don't have separation in them because one piece of paper is only so large. Every time, and when I put merged here, because I think it gives you a good sense of if the village taxpayers were not paying more for equal access to some of these, so community development is not the example of that, what would it cost everybody? So in the community development department, for example, a town taxpayer on a $280,000 home is paying $33 for community development services. A village taxpayer is paying $82 for community development services. And that's reflective of the fact that a village taxpayer is paying that 0.0119 town tax rate plus the village tax rate associated with community development. And so if you wanted to see what that looks like spread out across the entire tax base, that would be about $53 or about $54 each. So that's how to read the sheets. We are getting into the next section. I would like to next talk a little bit about, I want to talk about 4 of the individual department sheets before we move on to separation. So I want to talk, we just looked at community development, and I walked through that one with you. That was the example of the service that the village pays for into the town budget that they are not eligible to receive. So the community development department funded by the town only serves outside the village, and then the village community development department serves the village. The other, let me get back to sharing, the other separate functions, such as fire, libraries, recreation, buildings, and capital are a little bit less clear. For example, the buildings departments, while the town buildings are funded through the town budget and the village buildings are funded through the village budget, the village taxpayers are also owners of the town buildings. So this is where things get very complicated. Can I say with certainty that that's inequity? I don't know. Given, if we look at, given the ownership structure and the taxing structure, maybe that one's not. But I think when we start to talk about fire, so let's look at fire, for example. It should be showing on the screen. Somebody shout if it's too small or lopsided or anything. The fire departments have very similar budgets. when you adjust for the different treatment of capital, the town fire budget is $400,000 and the village fire budget is $350,000. That seems reasonable. They each serve, the town fire department primarily serves outside the village fire department primarily serves inside the village, but they respond to each other's calls through mutual aid agreements. Therefore, I would argue that everyone has equal access to fire services in the entire community. But when you get down to the way fire is funded, a homeowner outside the village owning a $280,000 home is paying $40 a year for fire services, and that same home in the village is paying $128 a year for fire services. So this is a sample of a service that everyone benefits from, but that the village taxpayers are paying more for. It's not all complicated bad news. We have a number of functions that are mostly or entirely consolidated through their operations or funding, although even some of these have some cleaning up to do as you get through them. But if we look at, it's not the one, I want to look at police, for example. And we're going to focus on police also when we get to separation, because police is the largest budget segment. And we don't think about it a lot because it's been consolidated for a number of years. But it really has the largest potential impact on the cost of separation, depending on how we're going to fund it, split it, divide it. So I want us to be aware of this one in particular. This one, everyone receives police services. Everyone pays the same effective tax rate. I want to finish this piece of me talking with just the summary sheet here. And what I've done in this summary sheet is I've just added up all the other department sheets to get an overall look at where we land. And this should look familiar to some of the charts that are presented and talked about around budget time. If you were trying to follow from the very beginning all the way through and tie back to your tax bill, there's a slight variance. It's like less than 0.25% on either side. And that's because I'm using unadjusted grand list numbers generally. And then the way the highway tax is calculated. So it's just slightly different, but it's an immaterial variance. But what we can see is that we have the sum total of the imbalances that we talked about before. I'm going to come back down from sharing. The next thing I want to do is move on to separation, but before I do that, I want to ask if the boards have questions about those departments side by sides, how to read it, or if you want me to go into more detail about any of them.
I'd say that was a great overview.
Thank you. Okay.
Sarah, I'd like to thank you for the enormous amount of work into this.
Well, thank you.
I have no questions at this moment.
All right, let's move on to separation. But before we do that, I would like to again ask everybody to take a second and imagine what your vision is for the future of Essex and Essex Junction. And just keep it in your head, what kind of community, what does the community look like that you want to live in? And I'm not just talking about how many people do you want to elect, how much do you want to pay in taxes, you know, what services, or maybe what services, but, you know, is it, I guess I don't even know how to guide you through this activity, but is it one community where we're done talking about this already? Is it two communities where we're also done talking about this already? You know, what is it really look for you? What gets you all revved up about being an Essex resident in the future? What is exciting for you about the potential of what our community can be. And I would like you to get an idea, or not everyone has to participate, and just think about that. What is Essex and Essex Junction to you as a place to live, work, and play? And how is that vision best served by a government? One government, two governments, 20? I don't know. And I would like you to just keep that in mind as we walk through separation numbers, and just consider how some of these items would impact your vision for the future of Essex. You know, and really think about it, because we're talking about people, right? We're on all sides of this. I think this is really a human conversation. We're talking about people who live here, who love living here, lived here a long time or a short time, who have kids here, families, businesses, and also people who work here and love working here and love serving this community. And which of these ways forward really serves all of those people better. So, separation. I also want to say, before I start sharing my screen again, which I will, but you all asked me to talk and I'm going to talk. I expect that many people were tempted to draw conclusions from the scenarios that I listed in the separation analysis. I think that's very natural and human thing to do. But I want to implore you not to, because the only thing I know for sure is that every single number I put in the separation analysis is wrong. That not one of these would be the reality if we were to go down this road. It's a great place to start, and we have to start somewhere. But I would wager that even if we negotiated these things to exactly the way I had them, these are not the numbers that would come out. That they're already out of date because this is FY20 budget numbers. The grand list has grown. As the grand list grows, new services will be required. So please, I hope we can look at these as a starting place for conversation. All right, that's it. Now I'll start to share some calculations again. And I'm going to share a spreadsheet. It's the same spreadsheet that's in the packet. I've just hidden some of the extra stuff off to the right so we can see it, that are not extra stuff, but like the range too. Let me see if I can find us here. And I'll pull it back up. I'll unhide for a second so you can see we're talking about the same pages that were in the packet. So again, somebody just shout if that's too small on the screen. By putting in two ranges into this analysis, I was hoping to show how wildly things can swing from one direction to another. And I didn't intentionally make, one the cheapest version and one the most expensive. What I did is I walked through and I thought about each of these budget segments and what might happen if we pulled it apart. You can, and I'm sure you noticed that there are some question marks still that I just do not know how much some of these things would cost. And all of these are best guesses or assumptions. I just want to demonstrate before we open it up to discussion on this, that here's this police department at the top. It's the biggest budget segment, just shy of $4.5 million. And questions about, or decisions about how police services are paid for have a large effect on the bottom line. In this analysis, I assumed in range 1 that we were going to split it 50-50, so based on population, so approximately population. But the town outside the village is a larger geographic area. So does that need to get weighted into the calculation? Is it number of calls? What about density of population? If we were to fund this, let's say based on grand list split, because we didn't really have anywhere, we didn't know where else to start. And we said, okay, we're going to separate this. and we're going to have the village pay 42% because their grand list is 42% of the whole. The town's going to pay 58%. I'm just going to change it on the screen so you can see with me exactly what happens. So this is just one small change. The village now picks up 8% less than my initial assumption. And I'm going to scroll down here to the bottom. And we are now in a situation where this separation costs essentially the same as merging. Whereas before, in that 50-50 based on population, it was less to the town outside the village and less of a benefit to the village. So I really want to share that with everybody watching, because little changes such as that have a large difference to the bottom line. And yeah, let's talk. So I'm sure, I hope, or I expect there are questions and comments on this section. I'm happy to unshare my screen. I could also keep it shared and we could make other changes and see how that affects the bottom line. Happy to hear about assumptions that are not included here. You know, I'm going to hand it back. That's the end of anything I had planned to talk about, and I will hand it back to the boards.
Sarah, thank you.
You're welcome.
Board members, what are your questions?
Here, I see. I'm gonna stop sharing. I see Pat has his hand up.
Pat, you're muted.
Of course I am, because I always am. Sarah, thank you so much. Appreciate all the hard work. Of this document, I know that there's so much speculation, but I think that the merger portion of that is relatively consistent because we know what those numbers are and we know what happens generally if merged, correct? Like there's a lot less, or could I say, is it accurate to say there's a lot less volatility in the if merged percentage scenarios than
I think so. Yeah, I think that is. There are still just countless things that could happen. So the if merge is still wrong because these numbers have changed. The grand list is changing. The grand list of the town outside the village is growing at a faster rate than the village grand list, which means that any sort of, the 12-year tax phase in the taxation plan as part of the merger is going to be less impactful over time because that town outside the village grand list is growing faster. So this, growth rates and service levels, these
I don't
not taking it. So, but yeah, so for the merged numbers, sorry, Pat, soapbox. I took the total cost. I said, I assume that the sum of these two is the total cost. That's the service level demanded by everybody, all put together, and then I divided it back out by the total grand list. And so that's where those numbers come from here.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, I really appreciate it. And I guess I'm saying this, and I might as well say it now because it's part question and it's part comment, and I think it's on my mind because Sarah, you and I were in the same meeting just before this, where we had a good talk about what's involved in an organization and how there are benefits to things that are not just numbers. There are significant benefits that when we kind of fall into a trap of looking at or assigning only dollar signs or percentages to figures like this, that we miss out on so many of the tangible benefits. And I just want to caution, obviously a lot of us are watching at home, but I think that it's very, very important for us to note that while these numbers do have some volatility, they meet generally with what I think all of us have known, that separation or merger, that the TOV would see their taxes in general rise, and that the town inside the village residents would see them decrease. What I don't think that these numbers cover at all, because they weren't supposed to, are the very real benefits that we get as one community. And begging everyone's indulgence, I want to give a very concrete example. 2 years ago, when we were discussing school transportation and merger, and we had a complete lack of buses, there was talk with GMT about cutting off one of the bus routes that ran up through the town. And through a concerted effort of the entire municipality, the town, the village, and the schools, we had a huge outpouring of support, and enough that GMT commented it was more than they had ever seen from a municipality before. And instead of cutting that route, which would have cut service to the workers who are at Blodgett or Gordini, as well as the students who live out on Sand Hill Road, they decided to keep that in play. That scenario does not happen in a community where we are separated. We become two completely distinct, different individuals. We don't have the voice of a larger community, and we lose out on things like that. So while I appreciate the numbers themselves, and I think everyone looking at this kind of, like I said, I think most of us or who've been following this for a while kind of know or think that this is in line with what we expected to see. I think it's really critically important that we not base all of our decisions off of purely the numbers, but rather recognizing that as a larger community and as one community, over the years, we've had multiple instances like that. Scenarios where, as one community, we've been able to make our voice heard and make changes that are deeply impactful for all of our community members. So I'm going to get off my soapbox now, Sarah, and let anyone else who has questions go ahead.
Thanks, Pat. Any other select board members, or do we want to just do a kind of free for all? Trustees jump in too?
Elaine, I'm not sure. Andrew, you're muted. I'm not sure if Andrew can. Yeah, go ahead, Andrew.
I'm not sure how well I'm going to be coming through right now. I've been having a few technical difficulties, and I'm not sure if I have a delay. I do really appreciate the effort that Sarah has put into this, which is clearly a significant amount of work, not only to make sure that the numbers are accurate, but also just the wherewithal to be able to present this to us tonight. And Sarah, I really appreciate your visioning exercise, as it's one of the perspectives that I really wanted to make sure that I know I myself didn't lose throughout this process. And Patrick, similar to what you had said, making sure that we understand there's so much more to our community than just a bottom line amount. So I really appreciate that. With regards to the numbers, one question I have is, Sarah, I assume one of the other significant areas of difficulty would be projecting in a separation world the building costs in terms of actual physical buildings. And if we use a police department example, and the village decides to create our own, we then have to figure out how to pay, we then have to build a police department and fund vehicles. And I assume we have really no idea what that would look like at this point.
No, without, asking those specific questions. And I just want to remind you, one of the things that we found in the merger analysis with the village debt is that debt must remain with those who voted for it. So even if the village were to separate and create, or the village and town were to separate, because it requires both to make that happen, and the village were to decide to build their own police station and hire their own police force and buy their own cruisers, they still have to pay the debt on the police station that would then be the town's, that's located in the village until 2035.
Similar with the renovations to the town office. And
yeah, that was the same bond. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, good point. Yeah. No, I have no other questions, and I don't mind with what Elaine had said about it. It's just the free for all. If you have a question from the board, feel free to raise your hand. I will just say, from being logged in as a guest, apparently I can't see the chat, and I can't see if residents want to speak in any way, shape, or form. So Elaine, I'm going to need you, or George, I'm going to need you to point out if any non-board member is trying to speak, because I can't tell.
Okay, I'll do my best.
Thank you.
My best.
And George, I see your hand.
See, there you go. See, you can do it. All right. I have a couple of comments with a question at the end. I'm going to make a comment that in this whole global discussion about separation, there's too much focus been put on the police. I think realistically, if in the very extremely unlikely event that we did actually separate, I can't imagine we would sink to the level on both sides that we would just disrupt our police department. We would not find a way to equitably share the police department. What possible sense would it make for us, for the village, to build its own police department when we're still paying one off? And also the town would be very motivated, because they will not be able to sustain a police department of the current size without the assistance of the village. So I think I see that as just sort of a huge non-issue. The interesting thing for me is, and this is not meant in any way as a criticism, particularly for our administrative staff. This is not what it's meant, but I think when I think of separation, and I've struck on this before, again, I don't want to drift into the political, but the entire community has evolved in a weird way. The village has certainly evolved because we have this relationship with the town where we have to help fund the town, but also fund our own stuff. So we have to be extraordinarily careful about how we spend our money. And I think, and I'm not, again, really seriously, not a criticism of the town, but I think it's been a bit of an opposite dynamic with the town. If you imagine the town of Essex by itself, a community of right now, like say 11,000 people, without the village tax base, I don't think that they would have the extent of the administrative services, engineering services. I don't think they'd have a full-time IT department. They would probably be farming out their human resources. I don't think you would have, for a community of 11,000 people, I don't think you would quite have the extent of services that the town has evolved. And again, I say that without, I'm trying to really walk the line between being having a realistic discussion, but not sounding like I'm being critical or of anyone. But I think that is an important dynamic to keep in mind if we did separate. The village, I think, has existed for many years with a much tighter belt. I guess that's probably the best way to put it. And I think it would be some big adjustments for the town. I think separation would be, on the other hand, I think it would be a kind of a catastrophic scenario for both sides. So I think we would have to think long and hard before we took that step. I would touch on one other thing. I do appreciate it, Sarah, that the one number that we did show currently, that for the same, for this community, the global Essex community, we're all deserving of the same level access to the same resources. Right now, residents in the village, on average, are paying $864 a year more for those services than their neighbors in the town. I think that's important. Again, not trying to get political. We don't have to solve it all at once, but it's an important issue that I've been saying all along is what has been driving merger all along. Lastly, Sarah, 2 years ago, can you just go over this? How did you account for Global Foundries in all your funding? Did you put all of Global Foundries in the village camp, or did you divide it between village and town camps? And just 2 years ago, the town grand list, as I recall, was $13 million, and now you're saying it's $15 million. What happened over the last 2 years that added $2 million to the town? I'm not questioning it. I just want to know if you could just tell me what happened to add $2 million to the town grand list. And I'm done. Thanks.
I don't have that data in front of me, George. I'll have to get with Karen to look at the grand list trends. I do have grand list trends pulled together. I do think that I know that there was like a considerable warehouse ad this year of like $1 million. So just the growth. So the growth rate in the town outside the village is over 2% on average each year. And then in the village, it has been trending under 1% the last couple of years. What was the first question? Oh, Global Foundries. So I didn't treat Global Foundries any differently than I did any other property in the town or the village. The brand list includes Global Foundries, and the value of Global Foundries is split accordingly. So I tried to do as little as possible to alter or manipulate the source data. And every time I did that, I walked you through what I did.
Okay, but I didn't to cut in, but just for and again, I really trying not to. It sounds like I'm trying to edge into political stuff, and I'm really not. But I just want to get a sense of when I look at the numbers, I understand. So you're saying in a calculation of complete separation of the village and the town, we're saying all of Global Foundries would go with the village. The town would no longer have any access to Global Foundries as part of its tax base. Is that correct?
That's correct. That $11 million figure, that's the village grand list. That's where Global Foundries is included, with the exception of one of their properties, which is outside the village, but it's a smaller one. Yeah.
Okay. Thank you. It's just, and I only say it because it seemed when Lauren did these for us before, for some reason it seemed to be a really big thing. She kept kind of splitting it, and I couldn't figure out why, and it didn't seem like it seemed like overly complex.
Yeah, Lauren and I talked about this recently, and it was split out because it is kind of a unique entity in that it's just very large. I mean, it's large enough to be disclosed in the footnotes of each financial statement as a concentration of revenue, and I really don't see that very often in Vermont. So so maybe that's why it was split out. But it is Brian Donahue was here the other day, and he had a quote that said, "It's not uncomplicated." And that's been my mantra ever since. So
this is complicated. No, he's wrong. This is very complicated.
Yes, no, it's not uncomplicated. Yeah. So I just, like I said, I just tried to stay as close to the source data as humanly possible, so that future Sarah, more than anyone else, so that future Sarah can say, where did I get these numbers? And then I can figure it out.
Okay, thank you.
Welcome.
Thank you, Sarah. And Dan, your hand was up next, but real quick, no future Sarah, just Sarah. All right, we're not planning for future Sarah right now, just Sarah.
Yeah, my comment pertains to the police department. The question about what we do as far as having police services in the village if we were to separate. And I don't see why we couldn't continue with the existing police services as they stand. I know that in Waterbury, they disbanded their police force. They have the state police patrolling through Waterbury. And I mean, not saying that we need to have state police come through Essex Junction, but there are communities nearby. So I'm not really, that wouldn't be a reason that I'd be worried about a separation per se. But I don't see why we would discontinue the police services we already share with the town. So that's it.
Thanks, Anne. May I just make I would like to make just a quick comment. And I think regardless of, what would be decided to do, the takeaway should be that how the funding is split has an impact to the answer of what the separation cost. And even small changes like population versus grand list versus, area are going to swing that pendulum wildly. So I think that's really, whether or not we were to do it, it's really how does it become, what's the funding mechanism? And then that drives the numbers. So that's all.
Thank you, Sarah. Patrick, then Evan.
I remembered this time, unmute. So the $280,000 figure is one that I've heard, honestly, for a long time, the average price of a home in Essex. But honestly, I don't believe that that's accurate anymore in even the remotest sense. Sarah, is that something that would come with like the townwide reappraisal, or is that just a figure that we've settled on using at some point in the past? Because the school district uses it too, so I'm not singling you out. I only mention it because real estate prices over the last like 2 years have gone up so dramatically that
real estate prices, not assessed property value. I'm sorry, I shouldn't cut you off.
No. Actually, it's good. I appreciate the clarification, because that's kind of, I guess, what I'm getting at. Because I continually hear that figure, the $280,000, but then I hear a home down the street that's selling for $350,000 that was $200,000 10 years ago. So the 280,000 doesn't seem to change. And I just don't know if that, like I said, if that comes with the reappraisal. And oh my God, Dan, you're killing me here, bro.
Dan, you are on camera. Much better.
To answer your question, Pat, correct. A reappraisal would change that figure because what we're talking about is average assessed value. And so I just pulled up here real quickly. I don't know if you all remember the Essex Housing Needs Assessment and Action Plan that was adopted November 26th of last year. And so that document actually has the average assessed value of lower than $280,000. So it's actually $275,000 in Essex. It's just shy of $260,000 in the village. And then the medians are $260,000 and $250,000 respectively. And so, you know, that the 280 is, I think, you know, a number that's come up and it sticks. And then we use it as a consistent basis for analysis, because if I'm constantly changing the denominator, the numbers are going to keep flipping. So yeah, so that's, you know, so you guys, I have a copy of that handy if anyone wants a refresher, but it's assessments that we're looking at here. And that's what your property taxes are multiplied by to make your total tax bill.
Right. Yeah, I just wanted to, I guess, clarify, you know, when we're looking at these numbers, if we, you know, if Essex needs a reappraisal in 2 years or 3 years, you know, that 280,000 is all of a sudden 340,000 or something, then.
Right, but then the tax rate is lower, yeah.
All the reappraisal does is shift who's paying what equitably through their tax rate. So it's going to change a lot, but we are not at the point where we need one, and we're probably at least 2 to 3 years away. But it is going to come.
Right.
And that has to do with the state mandate, not because we want to do it.
Yeah. All right. Thanks, guys.
Evan, was there anything else you had?
Well, first I want to thank Sarah and her staff for all the hard work. Thanks to the board for all their questions. Again, and this was a citizen-led question. It was not a board-led question that I'm aware of. Did it need to be known? Yeah, I'll agree. It probably helps to be known. As Sarah mentioned, there are just a crazy amount of assumptions one would have to make to see what the impact is. And as I understand it, the boards have chosen, for many reasons, the route of merger, mainly because we don't live on numbers alone. We live in a community, and a community that asks for and needs services. And when you are desperate to get to work on a January day after a 6-inch snowstorm, you're not worried about the budget number, are you? You're worried that we got out there and plowed the sidewalks and the roads so you can get to work and make a living to pay for your rent or your mortgage. We do that. And I think we do that very well. And a lot of times when we coordinate between the village and the town, we do better at it, and better than most anyway. So I appreciate the exercise. I think people need to know the information. But as Sarah mentioned, if you start changing some numbers, and I know we use the police department, you can use the fire department. There are so many calls for service, both in the village and the town outside the village, that neither is sized for the community they serve. They are actually relying on each other, both in equipment and expertise. For example, the village has a very expensive piece of equipment called a ladder truck. It is because we have large buildings and tall buildings, but the town has use for it as well, because sometimes a fire is very hard to get to from where they are, and the ladder truck provides them a better firefighting platform. That's a lot of coordination and it's a lot of goodwill. And I would hate to see that go away in any decisions in the future, because you will come to find out you need your neighbors more than you know. That's all I got for that. Sarah, great job.
And Amber, your hand is up.
Thanks, Sarah. This is it's a lot of information, and I have to admit that numbers are not my strong suit, which is why I went into the legal profession. So my eyes started to glaze over looking at these, but what I hope is a quick question. When I was trying to, I was looking at the separation numbers, and I was trying to figure out, what did you do with things like community development and the fire department, talking about the fire department, when you made assumptions for separation?
So the separation figures start with the current tax levy in each.
Mm-hmm.
And the current tax levy out of each budget includes those. And so I left them as they are. So I assumed that the cost of the town fire department all stays right in that town column. The cost of the village fire department all stays in the village column. Same with library and recreation and buildings, fire, community development.
Okay. Thank you.
You're welcome. Good question.
Raj, you're next.
Sarah, thanks for doing this work. It's great. Appreciate the time you put into it. Thinking about grant money and things like that, I'm assuming, well, I know both the town and the village coordinate on a lot of grants and a lot of that non-tax money that we seem to be very good at getting. In a separation scenario, we'd be presumably competing with each other for a lot of that. Do you have, in a sense of the impact that a separation would have? And, you know, it doesn't have to be exact, obviously, although I suspect you know exactly off the top of your head.
Well, I'm going to let you continue suspecting. I don't. I really don't. Grants are handled differently in each of the entities, which is sort of one of the, you know, consolidated finance, but not really consolidated yet things. I want to point out, you know, we recently each got $20,000 for a land records digitization grant. If we had been one organization, we only would have gotten one. But in many other instances, the grantor almost looks at us as one. So there was another local government expense reimbursement grant for Coronavirus Recovery Act funds. And the state costed us out based on village population versus town outside the village population, which is a struggle for me because the grant funds were basically split 50-50, but the budgets are not. The town budget is much larger than the village budget. So that's a challenge. One of the things, Raj, I think that we do really well together that is heavily grant funded is stormwater management. And so that is something that's happened out of the town budget seemingly all along. And those projects that are all happening out of the town capital budget, with coordination between Dennis and Annie and Aaron and Jim and Chelsea and Ricky, those are largely grant funded. And those are happening because of our joint, you know, our joint power, really. And so that's something that really kind of isn't always on our radar because it's a lot of capital money. Grant money sort of happens outside of the general government scope. So I know that doesn't quite answer your question, but.
No, I appreciate it. Thank you.
You're welcome.
George, go ahead.
I just want to make a comment, and again, not to delve into politics, but I was on the Joint Stormwater Committee, and when we started out, we looked at the list of stormwater projects in the village and the town, the total list that we thought we're going to have to be resolved in order to get us into compliance. And I think the village had something on the order of 60 or 80,000, and the town's stormwater needs were in the millions. And that's I'm not complaining about that, but I think when we say, well, and I think that Dennis has been very appropriately mixing all these together, and so the town has been paying for the village's stormwater costs. But I also need to point out that the town started out with far greater, most of the big stormwater projects of the entire community were in the town outside the village. probably mostly to do because with the village's sidewalks and sewer network, we're pretty tight. So just wanted to add some dimension to that. Thanks.
And Evan, your hand is up. Is that a holdover from before? Thank you.
Holdover. Thanks.
So are there any other board member questions or comments before we turn this over?
Yeah, Andrew, I'd just like to throw it out to the select board one more time. I thought I saw Andy's hand up at one point, and I'd love to ask Dawn and Vince if you have any questions or thoughts to share about this.
My hand was up to when Patrick was talking about the assessed value. I was going to mention the same thing. Sarah answered the question, the housing study. So it was all I was going to comment on.
Okay, but you don't have any further questions about Sarah's presentation?
No, I think, that's the question of separation is a trustee question because the village would need to initiate that. So I think I guess I followed what she went through, and if we get asked for a separation, then we'll have to deal with it.
Understood. Just that the presentation was not limited to separation. It was also containing status quo and merger figures. I just want to make sure that the select board has had a full opportunity to ask any questions. Dawn or Vince, do you have anything you need to ask of Sarah?
I'm good. Sarah did an
no,
awesome job as usual.
Yeah, I just want to reiterate the thanks to Sarah for putting this all together. And I did want to say that, I think this decision is sort of becoming less of a question of numbers and a question of do we want to be a community? And I do. I want Essex to be whole. That's my thought on that. But
okay, thanks.
Putting this all together and
make sure that okay, somebody's video is still on, or audio is still on, so let's make sure we mute when we're done talking. So yeah, I think the select board has finished with their need for questions. So Andrew, if we want to throw it open to the public, I'm happy to do the keeping track of who wants to speak since you can't see that part.
Really sorry to ask you to do it, but if you don't mind.
That's okay. So if I recall correctly, the numbers that Sarah presented today were a request of residents from the village. So I think some of them may be in the audience. And so I'd like to make sure that everyone in the audience has a chance to speak, but especially the folks who asked for this data, wondering if it answered your questions or generated more questions. So if you wish to speak, now would be the time. Please indicate that you need to speak either by raising your hand using the toolbar at the upper right or the toolbar at the center of your screen, or if you're able to, indicate that you wish to speak by saying so in the chat, and I'll do my best to keep track of the raising hands. And please announce your full name when you opt to speak, and if you're not speaking, keep your mic off. And I will start. We have Lorraine Zaloom and then Lori Houghton, and just continue to raise your hands as you want to speak. Go ahead, Lorraine.
Hi, Elaine. Thanks. This is Lorraine Zaloom. Sarah, that was amazing, by the way. It was like a master's thesis and a moving target. I don't know how you do that. But my comment actually wasn't about this. My hand was up before and my chat doesn't work, Elaine. So I was trying to catch the public comment section. And I was wondering, I know this was going back before, but is there any chance that you could just let us know who has started the racial sensitivity training and where we are with that?
Oh, sure. Very quickly, I can let you know that the training was open to select board members, trustees, and town staff and department heads. And there were 3 sessions. The third one was this afternoon. And Evan, you want to just give what the next steps are?
School board was included too.
Oh, school board too. Thank you, Andy. Evan, you're muted.
Thank you. School board members, department heads, our CJC Criminal Justice Center, was also involved. Next steps are we are scheduling an affinity group session for people who are Black, Indigenous, other races, and then we are going to have other listening sessions. So I believe the dates are not exactly final, but they're going to be close. October 7th for the affinity group, 14th and 21st for other listening sessions. We're going to have to work out some attendance because one of the things that we are learning through our training is a lot of the people that want to tell us their stories and want us to listen do not want to do it in a public meeting, in a public forum. They do not want to be recorded. All the things that state law requires of a public meeting of boards. They do want to tell us their stories. They do want us to hear them and see them and recognize them, but they just don't want to do it in this format either. So we're working out some details of that, but that's where we are. Want to thank our consultants. I want to thank the school district, all the members and the department heads who have given up 3 late afternoons, early evenings, and the homework that they had to do. And so we're getting ready for our listening sessions, and that's really what this is about, so that we will be ready to hear the public and receive what they're saying to us. Not necessarily come to decisions that evening, but to hear it and start that conversation and dialogue.
So did all the board members take the training class then?
A majority of the board have at least attended one due to work constraints. And then they did have the homework.
So
And then there were
we're not going to know who took it or who didn't take it or who finished things. Or I was just curious about, I would like to know who, if that's possible, and who didn't.
Lorraine, if it's helpful, I took 2 of the sessions. I was not able to take today's session because I had to work overtime. So I'll do the homework and hopefully that will suffice.
I was there for all 3, Elaine, or excuse me, Lorraine. But
I was there for all, Lorraine. This is Raj.
I was there for all 3 also. Andy wants.
And Dawn was there for all 3.
Yep. And Vince was there for at least one of them.
And there were 3.
Well, thank you
Hear me?
for everyone who attended. Thank you.
Yes. Yeah, I was there for one of them. Unfortunately, I couldn't make the other ones.
So Evan, didn't the police department also go through this training? They actually had a longer session than the boards did.
The police department did have their own sessions, not including with us, and they will continue with some other dialogues and some other trainings. Thank you, Andy, for that reminder.
Greg, did you want to add something to that?
Yeah, please. There's updates on the town website, essexvt.org, about the racial justice work. For people who are interested, we're also using Front Porch Forum. Ran into a snafu for the update that was supposed to go out today, but you should see that soon. And also anyone can feel free to email me. I have an email list that I'm keeping to send updates out to people. My email address is gduggan, DUGGAN, @essex.org. And the listening sessions that Evan mentioned, at least some of them are going to be RSVP, just so we can get a sense of numbers and what to expect. So same thing, if you're interested, you can email me at gduggan@essex.org.
Thanks, Greg. Okay, Lori Houghton.
Thank you. This is Lori Houghton. So I want to be clear, I am not advocating for merger or separation. I just would like to make a couple comments. And I was one of the people who signed the letter to request this information. So thank you, Sarah. I know this wasn't easy, and your presentation was very passionate. And so I know you took this very seriously. So I appreciate that. And to the boards, thank you for listening to the requests from the citizens. I will say, though, listening to some of the comments from board members and the municipal manager, I feel like there's more scare tactics being stated than there is what is important. So I want to caution the trustees and the select board and the staff who have worked, I know, tirelessly to get us to this point, that we are remembering there are citizens involved in the decision, and the citizens will be the ones voting on whether we merge or not. And so scare tactics are not the way to go. I will say what is important is something Vince said and a couple others alluded to, is what is the value in being whole? I have to admit, when I was on the board for 8 years, I don't think we ever came up with that. I was never able to come up with that, other than it's a tax issue for the village. So I'd like us to maybe take some time to all think about what is the value in being whole? Why should we merge? Or why should we separate? And something Sarah said earlier about the numbers, and I forget what she said exactly, but what I wrote down was, the vision drives the numbers that drives the funding. So what is our vision for our communities? We've all worked really hard to get to this point, and there's a lot of vocal voices in our community. We need to all take a step back and say, what is important for our community? There are a lot of small, mighty villages and towns in the state that get grant funding, that get state funding, that work really well, that contract with police, whether it's state police or another community. And there's also communities that do better because they're larger. We need to come up with the reasons why we should be one or the other, and then move forward. Thank you.
Thanks, Lori. Next up, Annie Cooper.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Thank you so much. You can hear me?
Yes, we can.
Yeah. Thank you so much. Sarah, I do not know what it felt like to be you, and I'm gonna cry, for the past few weeks, where the whole world, it must have felt like, was discussing you publicly and that you were coming up with the numbers. Sarah's gonna give the numbers, and I don't even know what that felt like. And I'm so grateful for your integrity and authenticity and your ability to convey something that's very complex so that we can hear it, and that you did it with such a genuinely kind and thoughtful compassion towards the strong thoughts that I know you must be aware of from all sides. And so thank you so much for that work and your manner. I'm so grateful to live where you work. And then I'd like to echo Lori about Vince. Vince, that was so succinct and so perfect. I agree. I agree with Lori. I agree with Vince that really, what do we want? And the step back is such a good idea, because there's so much passion in our community that when I consider all of that passion, thoughtfully planning a future that is best for all, regardless of what that is, and I don't mean merger, I don't know what I mean. When all of that passion and energy that we have in our community, that much love for Essex is phenomenal. And our ability to constantly communicate that through our neighbors, to our neighbors, this is like what dreams are made of. So whatever we come up with, I would like to trust us as a whole, as a community, and I value us. I'm really pontificating a little bit. My apologies. I'm excited and enthusiastic to be here and to live here. I was a little bit concerned that the select board didn't seem to have any questions, because to me, what Sarah presented was a far greater picture than, as Elaine pointed out, whether or not we separate. I think that the complexities of the buildings, of the what's merged and what's not, of the figures, and there's so much complexity to that I would appreciate and value, maybe down the road soon, hearing a little bit more about your thoughts on those pieces, because I really do value each and every board member of both boards. And I didn't mean to call out the select board like that. My apologies. It just was what I was thinking about. All right, I'm done talking so much. Thank you for giving me the space to do that.
Thank you, Annie. Are there any other residents in the audience who would like to speak? I'm flipping through the participants. I don't see any
Patty-
raised hands.
Elaine, Patty Davis is trying to wave on camera.
Oh, thank you. Thank you, Raj. Patty, you go ahead, and then I see Ken. So Patty and then Ken.
Okay, first off, Elaine, I love my signs on Saxon Hill Road. Love them.
Hopefully
And
everybody's enjoying them as much as you are, Patty.
I am just jumping with my, clicking my heels and encouraging everybody who's starting to run on Saxon Hill to stay consistent. Consistency makes a champion, and we're getting all these runners. I'm really happy. So I wanted to say that, but I just wanted to bring everybody's attention to something extraordinary. The town of Wyndham in southern Vermont, we should all eyeball it. It is so incredible. There's a COVID-19 resettlement, like, you know, when people from another country come and we say they're refugees. They call them the COVID refugees. They are coming high and low from DC, New York City, Boston. They have money. They're just flooding this little town of southern Vermont with a population of 739. It's so cool. So if you even go to our economists, we have an economist that lives in our neighborhood. I can't remember his name. Somebody Carr, Jeff Carr. He's he's the Vermont economist. It is incredible. They have a population now of 10,739. So the reason I'm bringing this up is you just never know. We are a magnet. Essex Junction, Essex Town, our whole mess. We are just a little magnet. And I am dying, just simply dying to know, Sarah Macy, what the 2020 census will bring, to see what, you know, obviously the more people that move to Essex Town or Essex Junction is going to help all our taxes. So that's a good thing. They had 129 houses for sale in Wyndham. They now only have 29. The person who runs the dump and the person who does the bottle drive in poor little Wyndham, he's just a Vermonter, he's lived there 3 generations. He's like, I gotta tell these COVID-19 resettlement people not to put their magazines with their bottles.
30 seconds, Patty, okay?
That's it. We need to really look at the census 2020. And as long as we have equal representation in all our districts, whether we have 3, 4, however many you want, I'm game.
Thank you. Thanks, Patty. Go ahead, Ken, and then Mike Sullivan.
Thank you all. Sarah, nice job. A lot of detail there. I appreciate your hard work. What do we want? That's the question I've heard put forth a few times. And I would suggest that after 70 years, since 1958, we don't want merger and we don't want separation. It seems to have not succeeded many times over. So what do we want? I think we need a more creative solution. I think we need to be 2 together, separate, but still together. That's what I'm hearing, and that's the feeling that I'm getting. So I would encourage the board to start thinking outside the box and start considering alternatives that satisfy everyone instead of just some, so that we can have a success. Last point. I heard Pat Murray mention a meeting that took place before this meeting. I wonder if the attendance to that meeting could be made public. That's it. Thank you.
Thank you, Ken. And just a technical thing, we're seeing that some folks are just not able to see the chat. I'm really sorry. There seems to be a Microsoft issue tonight. So we will continue to try to make sure everyone who wants to speak can speak. Mike Sullivan and then Sarah Stoltz.
Yeah. First of all, I wasn't gonna make this point, but to Ken's point, what do we want? I want my taxes fair. Period. First, and also secondly, Sarah, I really appreciate what you did. Your hard work was amazing. Your passion for our community showed very much through your through your personality. It was excellent. Thank you. But it's a point of interest. It was not the town of Wyndham, it was the town of Winhall. The article, there's an article of, I'm not sure if that was referenced, but the article is in the New York Times that I came across, and it is quite an amazing story about Vermont and about the difference between people who have lived here for a while and the people who have found the refuge in our beautiful state from the COVID. It's also an excellent point for why Vermont should work on high-speed internet infrastructure. The more we have of that, the more people will come and improve our taxes situation and make life all better for all of us. And that's it. Thank you. Thank you all to the boards and both boards for doing all the work you guys have done on this too. I appreciate all your hard work. Thank you.
Thank you, Mike. Sarah.
Hi, I feel the same way as everybody else does about all the hard work from the staff and the board members, so thanks everyone. Elaine, to Ken's point, one of the main reasons why I think this was a citizen request was because what Ken described is exactly what we do not want. So, can you hear me?
I can, but you've got something going on in the background.
Okay, I'll keep trying. All right, let me try again. So Elaine, what Ken talked about was possibly a factor as to why many of the village residents wanted to see those numbers. We do not agree with that. Many people do not agree with what he's saying. I would also point out that he is wrong about the fact that we do not want merger. We voted in 2006, the second time around, to not have merger because, I'm gonna make this very clear to everybody, it was stated we wanted to merge slowly. Are you there?
Yeah, we're there, Sarah.
Okay, so I want to make it very clear to everybody here that that was the big discussion going on back then. We need to move slowly, and we've done that. So I completely, passionately disagree with those statements. Thank you.
Thank you, Sarah. I've gotten a text from a resident who can't get on the chat, and I just want to, before I identify you, if you want to speak, please speak up now. Okay, doesn't sound like they can manage it technologically. Anyone else who wishes to speak?
Can you hear me?
Oh, I hear somebody. Who is that?
Oh, sorry. This is Liz Subin. It's Liz Subin. Can you hear me?
We can hear you now, Liz. Go ahead.
I just have very short. I just wanted to say that I feel like we're here tonight because a small and privileged minority in our community are making it less and less desirable to envision a future together. And I think we need to keep that in mind.
Okay, thank you, Liz. And Irene Renner, go ahead. Irene, can you unmute yourself? She can't unmute herself. I'm seeing that you're not muted at the moment. You're going back and forth. I'm really sorry for the technical issues. Okay, Irene, I'm going to unmute you. And just hang tight for a second, okay? Okay, you're unmuted. And now you're muted. Now you're
On my
unmuted.
screen, I'm not.
There you go.
Can you hear me?
Yep, go ahead.
Thank you. Sorry, my screen says I'm muted. I would second Pat's comment earlier that we can all work together when we want to. And I would offer that even if we have separated or if we decide to separate and share, I would expect we'd all work together with our friends and neighbors and neighboring towns, just as we do now when something comes up. When I was on the select board, we met repeatedly with Colchester over some water tower issues. It's not a foreign notion to get together with neighboring towns and get stuff done when the need happens. In answer to what Ken asked, what do we want? I would offer that we want an equal voice at the table. That's always been a problem in these merger negotiations, and it was again this time around. Until we have an equal number of people from both parts of town negotiating on their own behalf, we're going to end up with lopsided merger plans. So I think that although we have moved slowly, we have not moved fairly. And I think that's very obvious to the people, at least who live outside the village, who have had very little chance to be heard at the table, even though they have asked repeatedly for the last 3 years. I'm very impressed with Sarah's report. So thank you, Sarah, for all the hard work you did. I guess if I could sum it up, I would say the following, if I can get technology to work for me here. I think the numbers in Sarah's report don't show the biggest win for both parts of the town. While a merger causes the village to forfeit its special identity, autonomy, and control of its assets, separation would keep that intact. Plus, it would allow both parts of the town to gain unprecedented local control of the departments they hold most dear. Their libraries, their planning, their fire, their recreation and parks. Thanks.
Okay, thank you. And I've gotten a text from Gabrielle Smith who wishes to speak.
Can everyone hear me? I'm not sure what my connection is like.
We can hear you, Gabrielle.
I'm going to turn my camera on. I'm not sure if you're able to see me.
And try to get close to your mic.
Okay. Can you hear me now?
Yeah, much better.
So I've been in this community for 14 years. I moved here just before the 06 vote. What I've wanted is varied over the years. What I want now is to stop paying for things that I don't access and to stop paying taxes for things that feel and seem from Sarah's report to be unfairly taxed on us as village residents. The fire department seems the most obvious one. And the longer these conversations and negotiations and we're back and forth, the longer I am, and I'm going to use the S word, subsidizing to some degree the lower tax rate in the town outside the village. This is an untenable situation, and the status quo seems to be acceptable to a certain number of people, enough so that we keep doing this. My question to you all is, what is the end in sight? I don't want to separate. I'm happy to consider merger. I want a path forward to tax equity. As passionately as some people feel about having equal voice, I feel about having a fair tax rate across these two communities. I don't know how we get there, but this cannot, I just feel for myself. My patience is coming to an end, and I've only lived here 14 years. So I would ask all of you on both of my boards, please look at those numbers. Please understand, I know you all know what we know. It is complicated, but with each passing year, we continue to pay what I think is clearly from Sarah's report. What the actual number is, we don't know. Unfair taxation in some ways. I know it's not a crystal clear picture what that is, but the current status quo, it just seems clearly unfair to me. If I'm If I'm inaccurate in that, I encourage any of you to talk to me outside this meeting and let me know how I misunderstand that. Thank you all.
Thanks, Gabrielle. Is there anyone else who wishes to speak? All right, I'm not seeing any other hands. I'm not getting any other texts.
Renee, there's a woman just waving her hand. I'm sorry, I don't know who you are, ma'am.
Renee Dahl.
Oh, Renee, okay, sorry, I couldn't see the camera for you, Renee. Go ahead.
It's totally fine. My hand
There
isn't
you are.
working. Can you hear me all right?
Absolutely.
I am also one of the ones that signed that letter asking for the additional information. I have also lived here, I think we're going on 16 years. And for the most part, I know you all have put in a ton of work into this merger and can support it. And Sarah, you're a saint. Like, your energy level for this information blows my mind. Whatever we're paying her, it's not enough. I'm just going to put that out there. But I find my frustration with the process, it's been going on for so long as we've lived here, and the people who are screaming the loudest about not having the voice are the only ones that I can hear. It's nonstop. The village doesn't necessarily feel welcome by the town because there is this constant parade of meanness. And if we're not going to merge, we need to separate. I think at the end of the day, we just need to make a decision. I trust the people on the trust that are trustees here significantly, hence why I voted for them. So if they say the best choice is merger, then I'm fine with merger. But at the same time, if we are going to be put down as these high spending villagers, I'm over it, and I just want it to be done. I moved here specifically for the school system, and I chose the village specifically outside of the town. So I will own my high taxes, but at the same time, I just want it done. Make a decision and make whatever that decision is happen. Thank you. Sorry.
Thank you. No need to apologize. Is there anybody else who'd like to speak? Wayne Churchill?
Hey, can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Okay, thank you. I was just going to listen, but I felt inspired to speak after hearing what Renee just said, because it's hard for me to hear that people in the village feel like there's a parade of meanness from the town. That's not to say it doesn't exist. For all I know, it probably does. I've only lived here for 2.5 years, but to me, I know there's a lot of bad blood, or at least what I'm perceiving about things that have happened in what to me feels like ancient history. But from my perspective, as somebody who hasn't lived here that long, it sort of just feels like we're all kind of one. It's all Essex as far as I'm concerned. And I'll dodge the tomatoes that are probably being thrown at me for that. But I kind of feel like from my limited perspective that there's these three paths forward. There's the status quo, which I can't help but to feel like if we just try to prevent everything else from happening to have the status quo, it just sort of feels like a big kind of middle finger to the village from the town, because we're all, as far as I'm concerned, we're all kind of just one town, and to do something that benefits us at something that harms the village folks, that's something I have a really hard time living with. In terms of separation, I keep hearing people talk about, or hearing people say what might be some of the benefits of that, but I think it's, in my pea brain, it sounds like we're all going to see a huge increase in taxes because we're going to lose 50% of our tax base. That's for village and town. But I don't know. I probably need to be a little more educated on that. So that's why I can't help but feel like merger is kind of the best way forward in terms of fairness. And, and I heard somebody else say about, can we keep just looking at the numbers, and does it just more come down to what do we really feel like? And that's really just been kind of the theme of what I'm saying right now, is it feels like to separate feels like a terrible decision in my heart. And to keep with the status quo just feels like letting the situation in the village continue to bleed at, at our benefit. And that's not something that really feels good to me. So just wanted to say that. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, one last call for anybody who'd like to speak, particularly anyone who hasn't spoken yet. And then we're going to move on. Okay, Tracy Delphia.
Hi. Thanks for letting me speak. I'm a big believer in hope for the best, plan for the worst. For 3 years, folks have been talking about merger, looking at numbers, looking at the eventualities, hopeful eventualities. We just got the separation numbers. And I don't think that anyone in good conscience should look at those numbers and say, no one wants this, and not look at them again. I think you need to digest them, take a step back, really focus on what that means, what those possibilities could be in the eventuality that you may need those. You may need to have those conversations. And for me, I know I would much rather start thinking about those things and having those conversations now rather than after a potential no vote by the town in March, and have to start those conversations all over again. Keep looking at the numbers, take a step back, ask yourself some hard questions, and talk to your neighbors. You may be surprised.
Thank you. Okay, anybody else? Okay, we're gonna thank you everyone, first of all, for providing us with your opinion. And once again, Sarah, thank you for doing this outstanding piece of work and providing us with some excellent context and providing us with some accurate numbers, as accurate as they can be with all the considered assumptions and changes that must be wrapped into this stuff. I just want to make a quick comment just to remind folks, when we started this process more than 2 years ago, we formed a small committee, the governance subcommittee, and before we decided merger was the way to go, we looked at multiple possibilities, and we measured those possibilities against a whole list of ideals that we wanted. Does this bring our community together? Does this community allow us to have less confusing voting days? Does this governance model allow us to have more transparency in terms of budget? Does this make a new model make it more convenient for residents to access services? We had a whole list of criteria, which we can dig up, and it's on our Greater 2020 website, I believe. We looked at it holistically. And when we looked at all the different governance models, we realized that merger it answered all those questions with a yes. If we merge, yes, we can do this. If we merge, yes, we can do that. That was the one governance model that floated to the top after a lot of consideration. And so we've pursued it all along. And at this point, we are this close. The select board and the trustees have been negotiating in good faith for well over a year on a draft charter. And the trustees are going before the village voters with their version to see what the village voters are asking and what they want. And the select board is finishing up our deliberations on what we want that charter to look like. And we're going to go before the town voters and ask the same question. There's some discrepancies. We're still working out a few things, but we are so very close. So I just want everybody to remember how much work has gone into this and how much faith our boards have in the idea of merger and our staff. We would not have moved this far along, and we would not have already consolidated multiple departments to the point where we have saved taxpayers almost $3 million. The last time we voted on merger, nothing was consolidated other than police and senior bus or senior citizens center. We have moved so far down the spectrum of consolidation and merger because we know that it works. We know that it has saved us money, and we know that more importantly, it has made us a better community. So I just wanted to take the moment to thank everyone for sharing all the observations you had. and also to remember there is a light at the end of the tunnel. This conversation is going to come to a reasonable close in the near future, and we're almost there. And we're hoping, with all these great numbers that Sarah has provided, that we will now have the financial numbers to underpin what we feel is right to begin with, that we think that merger is the right way to go, and that's why we're going there. So thank you for letting me be on a soapbox for that. Just felt the need to share that we're on the right track and we're almost there. Thank you. Andrew, do you want to pick back up with the next agenda item?
Sure, I'd be happy to. That brings us to a nice transition there, Elaine, bringing us to the discussion on the draft charter for merger for the village and town. And so, Evan, were you going to pick this up?
I am. Thank you. I'm going to turn on my mic again. Thank you, Elaine. That was good, a good segue, because tonight it's just sort of a status update. Village has put merger on the ballot for November 3rd. They did go through the charter. They had a couple of decisions that they, lack of a better term, punted over to the select board. Select board met last week or so, I'm losing my days, went through those questions. And so I just put this on the agenda so that people understood, both because this is a joint meeting, where you both are on charter, where you are on the merger question on the ballot, and anything else that needs to be addressed tonight while you're two together. And then we don't have to belabor it too much, because we also have other things on the agenda. So that's kind of the opening for the status.
Thank you, Evan. For this portion of the conversation, I'd really like to hear from the select board in terms of any questions that they have, concerns, given that we have already put our charter out to vote for this November. We've already made that decision. Our charter has already been finalized for that vote in November. So from that stance, we have nothing else to change. And because of that, I also really appreciate the select board's dedication and willingness to really help make those over 20 decisions. We were more than happy to turn that over to you all. Thank you for doing that. We appreciate it. Helped to get us through to the finish line. At this point, I'd love to really hear from the select board.
Well, Andrew, I think, as you know, we are still looking at the draft. We had some questions that we sent out to Dan Richardson, and everything we're looking at is relatively minor. Things that we want to just feel comfortable with before we move forward. But the most important thing we wanted to do before we concluded our work with the charter was to put it out to the public for them to provide us some feedback before we finally went to a vote. So, our goal is to finish our discussions by the middle of October. We're like I said, this close. And then we're going to have a conversation with the planning commissions, which you will be joining us for, so that we make sure that we're on the right page for planning for our community. And then hopefully by the end of October, we will have a draft that we are content with, and we can go out to the public for their feedback. So we're hoping that the month of November, we will put that document out there, and we will have some public feedback, and we can make any final tweaks that we might need to make before we hold a vote on whether or not to put it on the March ballot. And we're doing that timing so that we give our clerk enough time to get all the legalese set up so that we have the warning and we have the ballot, and we have to allow all that time, as you know. So that's the hope. Select board members, any of you want to add to that, or if did I miss anything that you need to, you can correct me on? Pat, go ahead.
Had to check if I was muted. Okay, I'm good. I know, Evan, it cracks you up every time. So I think officially now, Elaine, correct me if I'm wrong or if we've gotten any word, but I mean, obviously session's over, so GovOps is not taking up the request this year. That's correct.
That's correct.
So we are going to have to work that out on our own, or the select board is going to have to come up with what we want to put in the charter for our proposal without, or rather, excuse me, let me rephrase. So at this point now, the select board needs to look at the representation and decide without a final answer from GovOps what we want to put in.
Yes and no. The legislature did not take it up. My understanding, and I may be wrong here, but my understanding is that they were willing to pick it up in January when they reconvene for the new biennium, but that it would need to be reintroduced. And I hope I'm not putting words in her mouth, but I'm pretty sure Representative Redmond said that she would reintroduce it in January.
Right, but I mean, at that point, I mean, we would be well past.
It's too late for us,
Yeah.
right? But I mean, that said, in my opinion, it is still on the table. And so that's why it's in the charter draft that we're working on.
Okay. Yeah, I wanted to make sure that was clear to the public that we put in every possible effort that we could to have government ops weigh in officially on the 3+3 charter change. You know, it was important to have a final answer, and unfortunately we weren't able to get it. But I think that the feedback for what people want to see in the charter is what you were talking about, is that we have a plan in November to bring the proposal to people to hear what they have to say about it. And you know, that's part of what was always going to be the process, and that's critical to remember.
Yes. Any other select board members? I can't see Vince. So Vince, I don't know if you're raising your hand. I don't want to accidentally overlook.
No, I am
Okay.
all set. Thank you very much.
Okay. So
Sorry,
Andrew,
I'm on my phone today because I can't get on my computer.
yeah, join the group. Okay, so Andrew, was that helpful to you?
Very much so, thank you. And I think it's also important, I believe, as you had mentioned, as my connection cut in and out for a moment there, I believe the only difference that exists between the two charters as they stand right now is representation. And so by far and large, 99.99% of our charters are identical at this point.
Yes and no. So after our conversations with you, we discovered that we had initially agreed that the state process on ordinance adoption was what we would follow, but then we realized upon closer reading that there's actually no hearing required in the state version. So we are probably going to revert back a little bit to the version that we have in the current town charter to ensure a public hearing for ordinance adoption. I believe that's probably the only other substantive, but then there's just a few tweaks left, you know, here and there. And so I'm not sure what the legal ruling on this is, but my guess is that the charter that the town, we were supposed to vote on identical charters in order to have them all pass, and that is, they're not going to be identical. So we're going to have some kind of reconciliation process at some point.
So instead of 99.9, I'll ease it to 95.
I'd even say 97.
I'll go with it. Close enough for government work, right?
Exactly.
Those are all the things that I wanted to say on that one, but I see George, your hand is up.
Yeah, thank you, Andrew. I've got two comments. Last week at our trustee meeting, we were talking about this. Someone made the comment that the big difference between the trustees are having we're putting in a 3-3-1 structure, and you're going to proceed with a 3-3 structure. And someone phrased that as us disagreeing on the structure of government in the new community, and that is absolutely not correct. What we're disagreeing with the select board on is that we just listened to the guidance that we got from the government ops committee, and we didn't see any wiggle room there. We didn't think that it was up for negotiation. We've been hearing that all along for the last 2 years. It was what legal counsel told us. And so we, with all due respect, we didn't think you were going to hear from the legislature before the end of the session and before you had to make a decision. And so I just want to clarify, it wasn't because we disagreed with the structure. We just didn't think that a 3-3 board structure was a viable option according to the legal guidance we had gotten. Having said that, I did put forward the idea, and I just wanted to throw it out for the select board to consider. And I don't know, it was like one of these late at night things. How do you get out of this? And I did want to think about and suggest that maybe one way out of this would be to have the moderator who was elected at annual meeting become the 7th member of the board in the event that there's a tie. And the logic would be, first of all, that the moderator is elected at large. The moderator, it has some authority at annual meeting. It's largely a ceremonial position, but the moderator has some authority at annual meeting to break ties. And the other component is that the moderator is elected every year. So if the moderator takes sides in a 3-3 dispute and makes a bad decisions, the voters can replace the moderator the following year. So I just wanted to throw that out as an idea that it may be, having had my nose in this stuff for the last 2.5 to 3 years and gotten a sense of the kind of legal legislative reasoning that the GovOps committee seems to like, it struck me as that this might be a way out. This might be a remedy to the sort of the roadblock we're facing. And I just wanted to throw it out there. Thanks.
Thanks, George. You know, I can't really say anything about that now, but our board could certainly talk about it.
Are there any other questions from trustees? Appears not.
Thank you. That's all we needed.
Sorry, I have myself muted there. So that would bring us to 5C. Going into discussion on how to update Greater Essex 2020.
I'll introduce this. Basically just wanted to bring this up to the boards. GreaterEssex2020.org was the website that we had created, I believe it was last year, to provide updates to the community about merger efforts. It was a shared website between the town and the village. Staff just wanted to bring it back up to the board's attention, get a little bit of direction now that the trustees have a draft, or not draft anymore, but a merger plan in place and a charter in place. It's not the same as these select boards. So staff is just wondering, I know the trustees wanted to speak to the select board a little bit about not co-opting the website and so making sure it was a shared thing. So there's some information about the village merger effort on the village website. But basically just an opportunity for the boards to chat a little bit about if you still want staff to use Greater Essex 2020 to provide updates and if that's still relevant.
Thank you, Greg. And absolutely, we do want to just reiterate one of the things that we're very adamant about is not using the Greater Essex 2020 website for the village's merger proposal at this point. Given that at a previous meeting, we had agreed to having updates come to both boards, seeing that currently the proposal is only from the village at this point didn't seem to make any sense, and it would also be contrary to what we had previously agreed to. So we are, for right now, we're using the village's website, and I assume that we're going to continue using a portion of the village's website for our efforts at this point. Along those lines, personally, I would be more than happy to continue using Greater Essex 2020 as the conduit for the overall merger process. I don't see the need to necessarily rebrand, if you will, and go to Greater Essex 2021 or to do something entirely different. Then again, I would also say that that's, if the trustees, if we decide to not vote again on this with the town, then it could also just be up to the town. And if the town website is utilized solely for that, it's totally within your purview.
I think as long as we keep the website updated with current materials, which we have fallen behind a little bit on that, I think, since our project manager left. So, but now that we have Linda on board, perhaps we can just make sure that all the data is up to date.
I'm not getting it.
Make sure we have all the information up to date, and that when it serves as a repository for the information on merger. I think that's the most important reason why we have that at the moment.
Are there any other questions from board members? George?
Yeah, I don't have a problem. I think the only reason we wanted to go with the village website is just for what you hit upon, Andrew. It's that we're kind of in a very immediate. Our timing is very tight, and the process of sort of sending, us creating some content, and then reserving it to be approved at a joint meeting, and then revising it maybe over another joint meeting, and then posting it onto the website, the 2020 website. It just wasn't possible, wasn't doable. We needed something where we could have a lot quicker turnaround time. I personally, I don't know about the other trustees, I personally don't have any problem. Any of the content that we posted on the village website, I would not have a problem with any of that being put on the Greater Essex 2020 website. I don't know, let the other trustees speak, but it's fine with me.
I hear you, George. That would be fine with me, but certainly would want to only be okay with it if the select board were to also be okay with it.
Oh yeah, sure.
But Roger, your hand is up.
Yeah, I guess I would ask everyone if they're okay with it at minimum, making life easier on residents we share and having a link at least to the village website information if we're not going to keep 2020 updated with ours at the very top and very bold. Some way to, let's make it easy for people to find the information. If they've for some reason gone there before and they go there again and the information is going to be different, let's make sure they get there one way or the other, I guess is all I would say.
Thank you, Rob. Any other questions, comments from trustees?
Select board members, do you have any thoughts on the topic? Go ahead, Pat.
I agree with everything Andrew said. I don't see any need to rebrand, and I'm certainly more than happy. This is a joint effort. There's no reason to not put all the information up there, including the village vote.
Yep. Andy.
I agree. I don't see any reason to exclude any information. I don't feel any proprietyness or whatever the right word is around the website. I think, that's all relevant information I think everybody should have access to.
Okay. All right. I think you have your answer there, Andrew.
Easy enough. I appreciate that. Thank you. So it appears from here, if there are no other questions, we would go on to the next agenda item, which my computer isn't going to right now. Whatever 5D is, take it away, whoever is on that one.
5D is the approving the creation and hire of an assistant manager. Evan, why don't you take that?
Sure. Well, at the last set of meetings, we talked about, you asked me what the need would be for merger delayed. There's also a goal of returning Sarah, our rock star of the evening and beyond, to her duties as the joint finance director of the village and the town, and not also be the assistant manager. So staff was looking at ways that we could break out those responsibilities. We feel that the assistant manager position that's being proposed would go a long way to sharing the workload of our communities, the town and the village, the night meetings, the committees, the work that we need to do to finish the work on merger. And if the vote doesn't go for merger, then how to administer two communities that are still going to want to work together. And we have a position that's vacant, which is the project manager position. And at the last meeting of the select board, it was the desire for us to wait a couple of months to fill the position if it's going to be approved, and then use the budgetary amount from that position through the end of the year. And then in next year's budget, we would have to put in the budget for the full salary and benefits for the position. With that, happy to answer any questions people have about the position, what the position will achieve. We have had questions, what is not getting done? And we'd be happy to start answering some of those things if you need to hear them.
I think it may be helpful, if not for the board, then at least for the residents to better understand the need, what, and along the lines of what you just said, of what is currently not being done and or could be done differently and or better.
Sure, I could, and I'm going to ask Greg to jump in when he gets, but, and I don't want to, I don't want this to sound like whining, because it sounds that way in my head, but just to start with, the average municipality probably meets twice a month, maybe a third meeting for something special. We average over 6 night meetings a month. To do that, we have to create 6 agendas. We have to create 6 packets. We have to communicate with the board chair and with the village president the contents of those meetings and make sure that all the materials and all the reasons for meeting and get done. Also within those meetings, we have all of our boards and commissions. And when we have vacancies, we do interviews and an interview process. So we're also all juggling people's schedules. We have attorneys that need to get scheduled if we have questions. So it is a lot of juggling to have 4 to 6 night meetings a month for staff. We have been doing it because we are working on merger, and it's an interim condition. That is just the beginning. We talk about other things. We talk about Sarah's role and responsibilities. Sarah's responsible for the creation of 2 budgets and the management of 2 budgets, totaling somewhere over $19 million. And that is not including the water and sewer funds of the communities. We have to do 2 audits. We do a lot of things in duplicate. We operate multiple buildings and multiple departments in multiple buildings. And so the span of control of the 2 communities right now is very difficult to do on a weekly basis. Plus special projects. COVID has not helped in many respects, because we are now dealing with people who used to be in our buildings who are now sometimes working remotely, sometimes working in our buildings. We're working under new work rules. All those things get jumbled, and I will say, for Greg and myself and Sarah, we get pulled in a lot of different directions, and trying to get this done on a weekly basis, and being factual and being correct and getting the numbers correct is paramount. And so we worry about that balance. And of the things that are not getting done, we talked a little bit about grants. We do a fair amount of grant writing and grant administration. We do not do a great job of grant coordination. When we are applying for things, it would be great if we were forward looking and knowing what grants were coming and what we were going to apply for. We do apply, and then sometimes wish we had had one more meeting to make sure we understood. Maybe we would have applied differently, knowing what we know a little bit later. And there are a lot of things in the organization, like we talked earlier about racial justice. To our discredit, racial justice was not on our radar screen at all when things happened several months ago, but it's at the top of the list now, and rightfully so. And so it just is things that happen and need to happen, need better coordination. And we feel that this position will be able to work in our structure to get those things done and done at a very high level. And I'll turn it over to Greg if he has anything to add.
Evan covered a lot of it. I'll just emphasize we still do a lot, but there's definitely stuff that we don't do or haven't gotten to, or that's delayed. I sent a list to Andy earlier today, so I was thinking about it. Just some items like the building needs analysis, which you should all be familiar with. That's way behind. It's just fallen off, not off, but to the side of my radar, and just hasn't gotten the focus it needs. I think Travis is on the call. He and I have been talking for years now about updating our onboarding process and getting people familiar, new employees in particular, with the public process and all the laws that we have to comply with. It's just one of the things we haven't gotten to. The trustees have talked about having some electronic signage in the village. Town offices has a sign update, and having a new assistant manager would help, being able to just distribute some of that workload and be able to even just better check in with department heads and staff on a regular basis. We do that, but a lot of times it's on an as needed basis as opposed to just a regular preemptive, proactive work. So I won't dwell on it too much, but those are just some examples, and happy to try to explain more if people have questions.
Thank you both. And Patrick, I see your hand is up.
Yep, thank you, Andrew. So I completely support this position. I'm actually going to ask a question that's kind of not really directly to this subject, but it came up the last time we talked about it. I think that there was some hesitation about filling it more immediately because we weren't sure what the tax situation was going to be. Now that we're most of the way through September, I'm wondering, I don't know if Sarah is even still on the call, but do we have a better idea for delinquency or non-payments, what percentage that might have been? I realize it's not directly impacting this issue, but since it was kind of tied in with that discussion last time we had it, I just think it would be, with COVID, getting an update on that portion of things would be nice.
Yeah, I'd be happy to really quickly. I am very pleased to report that as of the end of the business today, we are only 2% delinquent, which is lower than our average.
Great.
Wow.
That's really
I
impressive.
know. So yes, that's the update. And tomorrow's the last day to pay before the 3% penalty.
Thank you, property owners.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you.
That's a lot of refinancing right there.
All right. And back on this subject, yes, I completely approve. You guys have needed more help for a long time. So I'm 100% behind this. You guys put in so much effort. This is certainly the least that I think our two boards can do to support you.
Go ahead, Andy.
In the memo, it references tapping into fund balance to support this. It says under the cost section, it says the remaining 80,000 would need to come from fund balance.
Yeah, I can take that one. That was left over from the previous memo, Andy, and I apologize for any confusion there. It's basically the cost for this year would probably be about $50,000 if we started by late, mid-January, early February, which is the timeline at this point. That's about the $50,000 left over from the project manager, depending on benefits and whether it's a single plan or a family plan or exact start date. It may not be exactly 50, and we might have to dip into fund balance for a few $1,000s. The $80,000 it would still be $130,000 position roughly. So the additional cost would be added into the budget for fiscal 22. If I'm predicting the future well enough. So there is a cost there, but for the cost for this year would be about $50,000, taken mostly from that project manager position that has gone unfilled.
Okay, and this was acknowledged in the last meeting as well, but I want to bring it up again that we've in my memory, we've never added a permanent headcount outside of the budget schedule or budget process. So this is unusual situation, right, where we're adding somebody a permanent position mid-year. I have some concerns about that as a precedent, because we'll then go into the budget season with a previously added permanent head count. And we will have, I guess it's presumptive to say at this point, if we're doing a Australian ballot on at town meeting, whether or not the budget would be approved. But I'm wondering about the impact of waiting another 6 months so that we have an approved budget and then they start in July rather than you can start the hiring process with an approved budget rather than starting it now. I just asked, I feel as a select board member, I got to ask that question. Is there a way we could go use our normal process of getting additional headcount authorized by a townwide vote?
As much as I understand what you're asking on that, Andy, and this is an unusual circumstance, I think that because it's an unusual circumstance, we need to move forward, and the timing of the regular process defeats the purpose of the select board and the trustees saying, how can we help you? We need to support your workload. So, I just want to acknowledge the tension there between the process we always follow and the importance of not breaking precedent, but the unprecedented level of work that our boards are putting on this staff and that this one position can help alleviate.
So, yep, that was just a question. It wasn't a position. I just felt it.
I understand where you are, Andy, and I understand it, and just I feel like I'm just about to revert back to 6 years old. You asked me.
Yeah, but you also never say no.
I never say no to board requests. True, and other things I try not to because work needs to get done, and there's a lot of it.
Yeah, and so what I'm asking is if well, you're not going to say no, right? Because you want another, you need another person. You're but I think you could. I think staff could say no to these boards more often and avoid some of these situations. That's an opinion of mine. And unfortunately, my next question is going to be highly unpopular because we're talking to two boards here, right? But this is a town budget question, paid for out of the town budget. I'm sorry, I'm not trying to inflame anything here. I'm just asking the question: do we need to have any discussion about jurisdictional segregation? Who should be authorizing this hire?
I would be happy to jump in and say that if it's coming out of the town budget, then the trustees shouldn't vote on it. We can't approve of items to be changed in your budget. Similarly, you can't approve of ours. That's a statutorily clear thing to me.
Okay, so it's the way the recommendation in the memo is worded, it asks both boards to approve. That's why I asked the question.
Mm-hmm. Totally understand. And please know I don't think any differently of you right now than I did 3 minutes ago.
Okay. Sorry, I really agonized over whether to ask that question.
No, it's important for us to ask any question that's important.
And I'll be happy. Again, the way I like our organizational chart is this position would oversee town and village staff. And because a lot of what we do together. And we do try to align our policies and procedures and many other things. And so this is a great forum, you know, joint meetings to have these conversations. You know, I think you all treat Sarah, who just dropped off her camera, but Sarah is the assistant manager, as well as the joint finance director. She, you know, works her tail off on both ends and doesn't play favorites. If something makes sense one way, it has to make sense the other way. And one of the reasons why we're looking to put this position in the town budget is that's how it gets equitably distributed across our taxpayers. And every time we do joint stuff, it doesn't, it starts, I can't even think of the word or the words that describe the judo and gymnastics that we have to do to make it equitable across our taxpayers. Maybe Sarah has a better word. She's been working on it for weeks.
I fully support that it should be in the town budget. I was just asking the question about how we're going to vote it.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Thanks.
George, I think I see your hand is up.
Yeah, I have a bunch of comments. I totally no, all respect, Andrew, I completely disagree with you. I think the trustees absolutely need to be consulted on this and absolutely need to have jurisdiction on this. Why? Because this person, what I'm hearing, is going to be potentially supervising village staff. This person is an assistant to the manager whom we are both paying for. So I see that the trustees have a direct interest in this, and it's only appropriate that the cost be put in, as Evan just said, it be put in the town budget, because that means it's equally distributed. But I think in terms of jurisdiction, I think the jurisdiction should fall with both boards, since this person will be supervising village staff. I also want to say, I'm going to say at the outset, I support this, but again, this is an example of what I was referring to earlier, of a different way of doing things and a different perspective that the town government tends to have that the village government doesn't have because of the way we've evolved. I've said this before, when we did the an $86,000 building needs study, and I said it before when we hired a building superintendent. It's great when you can afford to have these things, but sometimes you just, if you're looking to provide tax relief, and that's really what merger is about for the village. We're trying to provide tax relief for people in the village, increasing the town budget. They still have to pay that tax increase. It's not from the village side, but it's from the town side. It's on their town budget, their town tax bill. And so I support it, but I also make a plea. I'm going to play the part of the curmudgeon here and say, sometimes it's great that you've got plans, and I admire the energy and the enthusiasm and the creativity, but sometimes you just got to not do all the things that you want to do. Onboarding, for example, I understand it's important, but maybe it's not that important. And some of the other things that you think you need this person for, you got to ask yourself, please, do you really need them? The other thing I want to ask is, if merger is successful, what I'm hearing is that the main need for this person is due to the fact that we have two boards. Administration is trying to deal with two separate boards, two separate sets of policies, two budgets, two agendas, and so forth. And so presumably, if merger is approved, that a lot of that duplication would be eliminated. So would this position be eliminated? Again, always trying to be mindful of the growth in bureaucracy. Once someone is hired, they have a tendency to justify their position. I've been around a long time, and I know I'm cynical, but it's kind of the way the world works, and I'll stop talking. Thanks.
I see there are a couple of hands up. Sarah, was yours to address something that Patrick had said? I'm sorry, that George had just said.
I'm gonna put my neck out here, and I have a few thoughts I'd like to share. Evan, I can see you, so give me the kill symbol if you want me to stop. There are things. Oh, Raj, should I not even get started? right now, I have the privilege of being the joint finance director here, which is a job I wanted long before it was offered to me. I wanted this job from the moment I met Lauren more so. I said, I want in on shared services. And I also get to be the assistant village manager. And in that role, I'm the supervisor for the 2 rec directors, the 2 library directors, and the assessor. I'm a staff person for the village trustees, for the capital committee. I attend the weekly manager department meetings with Evan and Greg, Travis, and Tammy and Linda, which I enjoy. But I also supervise 5 finance staff here as well. There are many, many things that are not getting done under the purview of assistant manager. I can't tell you the last time I've met with any of those department heads that I'm supposed to be supervising. I don't know what they're up to. I don't think that they feel like they can count on me. I think that there are things the trustees would like to be doing, certainly around economic development and other things that are precious to them in the village that are not getting done. When I think about what's the workload for upcoming trustees meetings, I do not know. I scramble at the last minute to see what do I have to put on the agenda. It is too much for one person. And so the idea that, you know, we would get a person and then they would justify their job just sits counter to me to what I've heard from both these boards, which is we recognize that the shared administration is you're overloaded. And then the other comment that I have that is a little bit off topic is you know, Andy and George, you both mentioned, you know, just say no, or not everything has to get done. I would ask you to really think about, do you mean that? And what does that look like when a topic that's really important to either board comes up and your team says, no, we can't handle that right now. So I appreciate you allowing me the opportunity to express things that have been bubbling up for me for quite some time. And I appreciate you all listening to our request for this position.
Thank you, Sarah. One thing I want to be quickly clear on is what I had said to Andy about us voting on this. If the village board wants to vote on it, sure, we can. But our vote is frankly a philosophical one. The request here is for the town to pay for it. We don't vote on the town public's work during the select board's budgetary deliberations. We don't vote on each department. We don't vote on each line item. So it would be very similar to that process. From a philosophical stance, trustees, if you want to have a vote on it, sure, let's have a vote on it. Happy to do it. It's just ours will not have a budgetary implication on it. The other thing I want to remind our boards is that we went through a process of evaluating our manager. I believe one of the things that we had discussed is we need that some assistance could be beneficial. I think what we're receiving from staff is a response in part to that, and also in response to an ask from the boards of, what do you need? So what we're getting is what we have asked for, and in some ways what we're getting is also what we recommended. So Patrick, I know your hand was up first, and then George, I think yours is up after.
I might have actually been able to save Sarah some of what she was going to say, because I think that she took most of the words out of my mouth. But I will reiterate that our 2 boards have met multiple times throughout the summer, and certainly correct me if I'm wrong, but I don't believe I am. We were pretty explicit that we told the staff, where are you overloaded? Where are you overtaxed? Come back to us. Let us know how we can help you and in what ways we can help you. I used almost those exact words myself, so maybe I misinterpreted what that meant for the rest of the board, but I didn't think I did. We asked them to come back to us and say, what do you need? Because we know that this merger process is going on longer than we anticipated. We know that there are things that are falling off the plate, and they could be important things. It is disingenuous, I think, of us to say at this point in the process, can you wait 6 more months? because I don't think that's what we were talking about in the summer. We were saying, what do you need now, and how can we support you in that? And in my opinion, that was always going to be a question of financial dollars. I don't think any of us thought that we were going to be volunteering to go down to Evan's office and do copies for him for, our bi-weekly meetings. So with respect to procedure and how we've done this before, I think that this was an explicit ask from us, or at least from my perspective, it was an explicit ask from me. So I'll own that myself. And maybe other board members agree with our conversations this summer and think that that was the same perspective that I had on it. Maybe not. But it seems to me like they're coming to us, our staff, with an answer to the question that we asked and that we told them that we would support them on. Is it atypical? Yeah, but I mean, again, it was a great meeting earlier today. I'll mention it again. This is something that has more value to it than just dollars. Our staff is overtaxed. For decades, Vermonters have been complaining about high taxes, and municipalities across the state have been cutting, and they've been doing more with less. And Essex hasn't been any different. And I kind of feel like our staff is in that position now, where they've been doing more with less for a long time. And when we finally asked them, what do you need? And they came to us with an answer. Now we're telling them, wait 3 more months, or wait 9 more months, or let's do this in the way that we usually do this. I don't agree with that. I think that this is a fair request from an explicit question that we asked from them. And I'm not bothered by the atypicalness of adding it mid-year. If the town residents disagree, then during the budget vote, then they will vote our budget down. But I don't think they will. I think all of our citizens recognize how hard all of our government works, and I think that they'd support this.
George, your hands up.
Yeah, I say a couple of things. First of all, Sarah, I absolutely, no one should get the impression whatsoever that I undervalue anything that anyone does. And, our job is to ask hard questions. And particularly when you're requesting a new employee, I think it's understandable that, in a public forum, it's our job, at least my job anyway, to ask tough questions. And I try to do it, and I can't emphasize enough, it's not meant with any degree of disrespect or a lack of appreciation for what you do. I want to go back to one thing, and so that's why really what it is, and if you remember what I said I did support this, but I always like to throw in the caution, so don't think you're just going to get an easy pass. You come back to this next time around, you're going to get the same thing. But I would throw it out. I mean, I have, again and again, I'm going to go back to a little bit of a tradition between village and town. I'm going to bet, and I don't know this for sure, but I'll bet if you put all the village department heads in a room and say, do you feel a lack of supervision? Do you feel you are under supervised and you are undermanaged? I'm going to bet that most of them would say no. So again, I don't necessarily have a problem with you hiring someone to help take up the load. But I would just sort of maybe in a very broad sense, have you consider, are you hiring this person to just put Band-Aids on things you can't get to and you feel that you need to get done? Or maybe when you hire this person, it's time to sort of globally rethink how you're organized. I'm not sure that the staff in the village needs the degree of supervision that I sometimes feel I hear from you, that you seem to think they need. Obviously, I can't question your judgment from a managerial administrative perspective, but I can judge it from an institutional perspective of having been with the village for years, and this level of supervision wasn't necessary, and now it's there. And so maybe that effort, instead of expending, if this new person expending that effort, maybe this person's efforts could be directed somewhere else. Thanks. And again, no disrespect, nothing but appreciation for everything that you guys do.
I think we might want to chalk some of those observations down to walk a mile in another person's shoes.
Right.
Andy?
Is there any possibility of making this position temporary until we do go through a budget process?
That's that's a question I never contemplated, other than I don't know how to do that. I don't know
think it
who
would
would
hinder. I think that would greatly hinder recruitment process to
Yes,
hire
yeah,
someone.
I could imagine it would be a challenge. Yeah. Yeah.
So is that, I mean, do we, Elaine, apologies, because I'm not completely clear if we need a motion from the select board first after discussing where it's coming out of the budget, but, and I guess I don't want to, I see actually George's hand is up, so I don't want to derail
Sorry.
conversation
No.
either.
My hand is up. Sorry.
But otherwise, I'm willing to make a motion now.
There's also the public.
Yeah.
Yes, let's open it up to the public before we put a vote on the table. Patty, I see you waving your hand heavily. Go right ahead.
I just wondered, I'm just throwing this out there as an idea. I mean, I love what Sarah Macy said about having a hunch about possibly the town outside the village might have grown some. We don't know till 2020 census. And 2020 is coming up real soon. Is there any possible way that we can wait, maybe compromise and wait till January or right after the census come out? And then at that point, maybe I'm throwing this out as an idea, hire a manager just for the town outside the village. The reason I say that is because two reasons. Number one, the 4 years I've lived here, it seems that you've taken on this merger task between the town outside the village and the village, you guys in the village, and you've given yourself so much more work, where in Colchester, they only had 2 meetings a month, or like the average that Evan was talking about. But because you have this extra task of merger on your plate, it's almost like, and I'm not putting anyone down, but the town outside the village and the village is putting more, you're digging your own hole, creating more work. Do you hear what I'm saying? Does that make sense?
Sure,
Anyway,
Pat.
that's it. That's all I want to say. It's just an idea.
Thanks.
Because we haven't discussed separation, and I'm not for or against. All I want is equal representation. I don't care.
Okay, thanks, Patty. Annie, go ahead. Annie Cooper?
Thank you. Can you hear me?
Sure can.
Thank you. I just want to say that thank you to everyone. That got a little, I was getting a little tight there. So thank you for that back and forth. It was making me a little uncomfortable. So thank you for all staying invested in it. I think the job description was very clear that was presented at the last meeting, 2 meetings ago, was it, Evan? I think the job description was so clear. And Evan was so confident in how he presented the job, and then all the down the roadness that could happen. Evan presented the scenarios for how the job could grow with the things we were doing. And I mean, I know my opinion is just over here like this, but I just feel like what Patrick said, I heard is true, that there was discussion, that the boards asked what was needed. The staff came back with a very clear picture of it. And I feel that it's a great ask, and it can only be great. I don't see anything, and I agree with Patrick, I don't see anything that would be ripped apart at a town meeting about the budget. I understand what Andy's asking about the temporary, but Evan very clearly stated how he would grow and flow the position forward. And I feel solid about it from my voice over here. Thank you.
Thanks, Annie. Anyone else?
Raj has his hand up and so does Andy.
Yes, I just want to double check and make sure there isn't anyone else from the public before we pull it back to the boards. Looks like there isn't, so please go ahead, Andy, then Raj.
Raj had his hand up first.
My apologies, Raj, then Andy.
Thanks, Andy. I've heard this before, and I don't want to get into the habit of responding. Patty Davis brought up, hiring someone for the town outside the village. I just wanted to point out for folks listening at home, there is no entity that's the town outside the village. There's the town, and then there's the village. So we don't hire people for a section of the community that doesn't actually have it's not an entity, it's not a municipality, the town outside the village. So I just wanted to make that point that's maybe eager, maybe she's eager for that, but we're not there. So I just wanted to bring that up. Thanks.
Andy.
Yeah, I wanted to comment on the job description itself. In the objective and purpose section, it uses the phrase especially involving economic development, but then in the essential functions sections, it doesn't refer to that at all. I know we have not had anybody on staff dedicated to economic development, and I think that's a plus here that could be highlighted. And also, I think that the essential functions section should be consistent with the objective and purpose. My other comment, and it's kind of related to a later agenda item about budget goals. One of the things I'm going to suggest is that we have some sort of line item in the budget that talks about equity and inclusivity. And it may not be appropriate for this person. I don't know, but I guess I'm looking for comment or consideration of whether, if we have I'm gonna encourage us to have a line item in the budget specifically, to address equity and inclusion. Whether this individual we hire could have some of that responsibility as their role, so that we can flesh that out, or do something. Have an owner defined for the equity and inclusivity work or stuff that we're going to do based on the work we have coming forward soon. And then I guess my other comment is, having asked the question I asked before, and respecting what both Andrew and George said, I do think that it would be appropriate to at least understand the trustees' position, and with regard to whether they would support this additional headcount. Again, because village employees would be supervised, but then again, the vote to add it to the budget, I think, should be just the select board.
Raj, Evan, your hands are up. Do you mind if I quickly address Andy's question?
I'll wait.
So this came to the village board meeting. I don't remember how many weeks ago. We didn't vote on it. We didn't take a consensus as a board based on the questions that were asked at that point in time. This is the first I've heard of any kind of actual dissent or disagreement with it. I'm happy to say that based on what we've said to staff before, I certainly see the need for it. Totally happy if the village staff are supervised by a town employee. They currently are in many instances, which overwhelmingly things are going well. Raj, I don't know if your hand is up before Evan, but why don't you go ahead and then Evan.
Please go first, Raj.
All right, I just want to thank Andy for that idea on potentially having this position responsible for an equity perspective, and also his second point about the trustees. Thanks very much.
Yep, thank you.
I also want to thank Andy for the equity and inclusion. That is, one of the things we're talking about is having someone take that ownership that, I would love to be able to do it. I'm committed to it, but I get pulled in so many different ways. And this is something that needs, someone who everybody knows that's who they go to, and that, make sure the trainings happen, that there's a budget that's managed. How we do things in the future versus how we've always done things. Again, through our training and through different lens, how are we recruiting? How are we evaluating our employees? How do we onboard them and bring them into our organization and let them know, that we want them to be here, everybody. And if they are a person of color or a woman or a man, it doesn't, they're welcomed into our organization and they know what's expected of them and all those things that go with this. And so thank you, Andy, for that. Yes, I will absolutely look at making equity and inclusion in the job description. But we're gonna have to get started on that before, we can't hold off 3 months for that, but this person would come in and eventually take over those roles and responsibilities. And work with Travis, myself, Greg, Sarah, and all the department heads on this endeavor. We have a ways to go.
George, go ahead.
Yeah, I'm just, can you just clarify, why isn't equity inclusion a function of HR? How is that different? Isn't that part of Travis's role now?
Yeah, he is working on it. But
Okay.
he's one person supporting 150 full and part-time employees, and then a couple hundred seasonals, plus COVID, plus all the state rules and regulations, plus our health insurance, our portfolio as well. So it's somebody who can work with him on those issues.
Okay. Okay.
Travis, did you want to address that?
Yeah, I was just gonna to add, it's certainly part of my role. It's certainly part of the role of all of the management team. It's absolutely on my radar, and it's part of what I do every day. But like Sarah mentioned, there's a lot going on. I do all the day-to-day HR duties that Patty Benoit did, that I'm drawing a blank on her name, Dan Myers did in the town, and a lot of the higher level stuff that Doug Fisher did and that Pat did. Some of that's moved on to my role as well. So I unfortunately get bogged down with a lot of the day-to-day recruitment, payroll, benefit administration, leave administration. So I think having someone like this position, I do think that makes a lot of sense, to have someone who's really dedicated to this and can focus on it, maybe a little bit more than I'm able to right now. So I'm absolutely a part of it, and I'm always going to be a part of it, and I see that as a huge part of my role. But it's not something that I'm able to focus on. I think to the extent it needs to be focused on right now.
Okay.
The only thing I want to say to that as well, if I may, real quick, is that there have been 2 organizations I've worked for that have around the same number of employees that the town of Essex does, both of which had 4 FTEs in their HR departments, and we have 1. So just for a little bit of perspective, personally, I'd say that's pretty grossly understaffed.
It's going to go to his head.
You're welcome. Evan, your hand is up. Roger, your hand is up.
No, it's a holdover, my bad.
I heard earlier that I think, Patrick, you were thinking of making a motion?
I was indeed, and I will happily do it now as soon as I scroll back up. I move that the select board approve the creation and hire of an assistant manager with the details and responsibilities laid out in our memo.
Thank you, Pat. Is there a second? Was that Vince?
I'll second that. Yep,
Thank
that was
you,
me.
Vince. Any further discussion? Andy?
I just want to make sure that were Andrew's comments earlier saying that we do have the consensus of the trustees for this position?
You cut off when you first started speaking. Could you say that again? I'm sorry.
So I just want to clarify, make sure I understood that Andrew's comments earlier were an indication of consensus from the trustees. Okay, thank you.
Okay, we have a motion and a second on the table. Are there any further comments or discussion? Seeing none.
I just
Go ahead, Vince.
I just wanted to thank staff for all that they do right now. I work in an organization, and I know how it is to deal with leadership that doesn't know your day-to-day, what your day-to-day needs. And I've run afoul of that frustration myself in my organization. So I know this isn't like it's always stressful to go to people that supervise you and ask you for more resources. But I appreciate you guys for coming forward and putting this forward.
Thank you, Vince. Any other comments or discussion? All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, motion carries.
So trustees, we can make a similar motion if you'd like. At the same time, as I had said before, there is no budgetary implication from our decision. This would frankly be philosophical.
I'll make the motion, Andrew.
Second.
Thank you, George. Thank you, Raj. Is there any further discussion on the motion? Hearing none, all those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Anybody opposed? Passed unanimously. Thank you. And this would take, well, thank you, staff.
Thank you. Thank you for your support.
And this would take us into the discussion of budget goals for fiscal year 2022.
It's really just a conversation of what's on your mind as we go into budget season. Is there anything at the top of your mind that should be included in at least the proposed budgets of the village and the town? And I'm going to stop back one last thing, and I've mentioned this to Elaine, just so the town remembers, we did a 0 rate increase this fiscal year.
The meeting is actually an online meeting.
Dan, you're not muted.
He is now.
Okay, so when we start, and Sarah can probably address this a little bit, we're going to need to massage the budget to deal with a 0 increase, and then it's just something we're going to have to do. But that was the select board's choice. We were originally at, Sarah, are you still with us? Do you remember what our budget increase number was before we adjusted it down based on COVID?
No, I don't remember off the top of my head. We ended up with a flat rate increase, but because there was grand list growth, the projected tax revenue isn't going to be flat from last year. It's going to be a little bit higher. So we'll probably be looking to increase, the amount of fund balance we use to offset the tax rate for this year as we phase back out of that. And it'll be interesting to see where other things come in.
Okay. So just looking to find out from the 10 elected officials what goals you'd like to see us address in the budget. And we'll try to hit the mark.
Okay, go ahead, Pat.
Evan, how detailed do you want this to be? Like, do you want us to speak very generally, or do you want some specific examples?
Let's start generalization and then I'll ask you for specifics.
Sure.
Try
I
to
know
stay-
it's sure. I'll try to keep a 40,000 foot view, and I know this is a subject that you are going to hate me for bringing up because we talk about it quite a bit. But I get a lot of emails about it, and it's the winter plan and it's plowing in the TOV, especially sidewalks for kids to get to school buses and stuff. And how we can possibly expand out if we need to. I just think that it's something that residents come to me with frequently enough that now that I'm not talking about it in the middle of winter of last year when we were doing the budgets. If you're looking for a 6-month ahead of time view, then that would be something I'd like for us to potentially take a look at, maybe work with the school district about, maybe more of a comprehensive plan or idea about what neighborhoods aren't getting it, what neighborhoods might need it based on population, and if there's anything that Public Works can do, if it's new equipment, if it's temporary hires or what have you. Just something I'd like to explore.
Okay. Anything else, Pat?
Andy actually talked equity and stuff, so that was good. And Elaine, I think, actually had talked about that at our budget sessions back in January as well. So I think some of that may already be baked into our existing budgets. But continuing along with that trend, I think, is extremely important to our citizens right now. So continuing that work, making sure that we're not just going to get through the sessions we have planned right now with Tabitha and Sue, and then let it go and consider us all trained. This is something that with years on the school board, I know is a constant, repeated effort. It takes years to overcome. So making sure that we're addressing that every year going forward, I think, is important.
Andy, Dawn, or Vince? Andy?
Yeah, I did send a list earlier. A couple things, maybe they're too specific, but our entire southern border is waterfront, but we don't have a canoe launch. With COVID, people have gone crazy with kayaks. You can't even buy them in the stores, and so I don't know. It just seems like we got that long river as our border. We ought to be able to have at least some way to get to it. I also proposed consolidating park maintenance under one organization so that we're taking care of our parks all out of the same place. Just a possibility. We did get a recommendation from the Public Works and Highway Consolidation Group. I think I'd like to see that work continue. I ask every year to eliminate the town outside the village highway tax. I think we need to make sure we're not falling behind on our space study, whatever next things we have to do there. There was talk a while back about fixing the rear entrance to the Essex Free Library, the ice and snow that built up there on our handicap access. We've talked a couple times in the past about establishing an affordable housing fund or some sort of budget for our housing commission. I don't know where that is at this point. And then the equity and inclusion question, Elaine had previously proposed that we add a category for our human services funding or whatever, and I think it would
as a priority
as a category or a priority within the categories that we have. I think it would make a stronger statement if we had it as a line item in our budget rather than having it be subject to the vagaries of our human service funding process. Not that it's a vague process at all, but it can vary year to year. It can also be, the select board has the way the process is set up. The select board chooses which categories to approve every year, And, a future select board could remove it from the categories in the future if they don't see it as important. But anyway, I think it makes a stronger statement if it's a specific line item in our budget. And then also, given that we've had a prior discussion about potentially adding a head count for that, I think I would be in favor of having it as a line item rather than come out of the human service funding. So that's it.
Thanks, Andy. Dawn, do you have anything for your Christmas list for Budget Santa?
No, I'm good.
Vince?
I don't really have anything budget wise, I guess. Like, I don't know the process well enough, but do we do anything budgetarily with like the Saxon Hill area?
In terms of things like trail maintenance?
Yeah, or, like planning and stuff like that with landowners.
I'm sure we do, but I think maybe Greg might be in a better position to answer that more specifically.
Okay.
Yep, Vince, I'll give you the overview and can put you in touch with community development or recreation, depending on what your interests are. But basically, they're working together. Those two departments on the Saxon Hill area. They recently, in the past year, have finished a Saxon Hill. It's not quite a management plan, but it's sort of the baseline for that and vision for the Saxon Hill area, which is basically to keep it the recreation open space part, keep it light recreation, trails, biking, walking, those types of things. There's also part of that land there, obviously, is set aside for industrial development. The Planning Commission and community development work on the plans and development plans for that area. The town receives, I want to say it's $3,000 a year for some of the work that's going on there as part of an agreement with one of the primary landowners to do maintenance on the trails in the area. So there is a fair amount of planning and efforts going on there, but I can either answer some questions, or if you want to touch base after the meeting, I can put you in touch with people who are even more knowledgeable than me.
Yeah, I think we can probably take that offline, Greg.
Okay.
Yeah, I don't really have anything else.
Thanks, Vince. I have a few items that I just want to, I've emailed Evan about them, but I just want to talk about them in public pretty quickly. Just make sure. So I echo Andy's observation about the town outside the village highway tax. Let's try to put in our calculations whether or not we can live without it. I know that we've been holding on to it a little, not holding on to it, but considering it as a gradual reduction that would be a part of the calculus for the taxation plan of merger. But whether or not we merge, we should look at how we can eliminate that, since there's very little of it left to begin with. And also regarding the Public Works report that Andy referred to, I'd like us to consider moving village capital and rolling stock over to the town budget, regardless of whether we merge. This would handle, it would smooth out a significant portion of the tax inequity that exists in the town budget regarding village voters. So let's talk about making that shift, and also talk about making the capital project process of selecting which projects to be taken on more consistent, more transparent, more accountable, and have more public participation so that we all know what's coming and it's an organized way of choosing projects, which I admittedly is not part necessarily of the budget process, but it is an essential aspect of it. And then I know that once our community conversations on equity are underway, that eventually the topic will come about on how we budget for our police. And so I'm going to want to talk about allocating more funding within our police budget for training and CJC services, because our personnel costs and police take up 90.1% of the entire line item for the police, and 0.4%, which is only $18,720, goes towards training. and 0.3%, which is I think $16,000, goes towards the CJC. So we really do need to talk about reallocating some funding so that those services are better supported. That's what I'm going to want to talk about.
Select Board, sounds like you're all set. George, you've been patiently waiting. Go ahead.
Well, I don't want to, if someone else, another trustee wants to jump in, I'll lower my hand. You good? Okay.
Been waiting.
I wasn't sure of the process here. Are we talking about us talking about the town budget or us talking about the village budget? So I'm going to just jump in and make a few comments about the town budget. I first of all completely support Elaine's proposition, and I would like to see us move more towards this. Really, in the era we're in, there's really no longer a justification for the town to be taking so much money out of the village and spending it on capital expenditures almost exclusively outside the village. We really need to be moving towards equity. It doesn't matter what the village is doing. It's just fair. I mean, it's just fair, and we've heard this discussion tonight. But the problem I have with this is that this has to be under the projects that are done have to be under the villages and the trustees' jurisdiction. Why? Because the constituents come to us when they need a road fixed. Constituents come to us when they have these capital needs. And so there has to be some recognition that these expenditures are happening, but they're happening in our neck of the woods where we have control and we have direct contact with people. So I do think that has to be worked out. I think the agreement we have with Public Works right now is excellent. I think it's a great model, and I think it's worked really well. The other thing is I would wholeheartedly agree with what Elaine alluded to, I think, but I would suggest that when it comes to planning capital expenditures, the village does it better than the town. I'm sorry, there it is. I just said it. Sorry if it offends people, but we do have a public process. It is, the village engineer is present, the village public works superintendent is present, a couple of trustees are present, but we have members of the public, and the meetings are open to the public, and there is public input on what projects get built. So I think it's a good model for you to look at going forward for potentially, changing the way you do business there. Lastly, folks, I'm going to be blunt, Select Board. I think the world of all of you, and I think you do a great job. But we just heard about an hour ago that your neighbors, your constituents in the village, are paying on average something close to $900 more a year in their municipal tax bills than your constituents outside the village. And with all due respect, and I think all of the things you just mentioned are great, but every single one of them was an ask for more money, meaning you're putting a greater financial burden on people who are already overwhelmingly burdened. So just please keep that in mind. Thank you.
Raj, go ahead. Raj,
it's almost 10. Give me a break. So we've talked about this in the past 4 or 5 months, and we sort of tabled the discussion. What I think as the budget season approaches, we should take it up again, hoping to get further in the discussion. And that's stipends for board members, ways to attract different volunteers for some of our committees, boards, and even these 2 boards. I think we need to take a good look at that. We've discussed it in the last few Mondays. It's come up here and there. I think it's an important topic. I think we need more voices, not fewer. And I think if it means that we're trying to get people that otherwise wouldn't make it without something like, let's say, babysitting or God knows what else, that we are able to attract and support them in that. And a line item or just overall rethinking how we do this. It is not about whether you need it or whether you're a volunteer or any of that. It is about simply who's sitting at the table. And we have to figure out how to get more people to join us in doing this. And sometimes, frankly, it is about a little bit of money. So that's sort of my priority for this budget season. The other stuff, you know, Patrick brought up increases, and we all knew that there's pressure on the town outside the village for sidewalk plowing and maintenance and creation and all that. And I would just say that if there's a way to keep that off of the tax bill for village residents, you know, we did put down in the proposed merger document that we would take on our own sidewalk maintenance and plowing for the next 12 years, should it go through. So adding anything to that for new development, maintenance, or otherwise would at least be part of the discussion. And maybe what Elaine is suggesting would handle that. I'm really interested in learning more about how that would all work. And also, just kind of based out of the discussion we had, it was an interesting discussion with, I believe it was Jake from Tree Farm. You know, we're starting to see pressure on different parts of our community for different outdoor needs. So I'd be curious to hear from our parks directors to see, you know, what they're seeing and hear what they're going to ask for in their budgets, and see how maybe some of our current facilities may be repurposed, and if that costs anything. I love Andy's idea about the canoe launch. That's phenomenal. I wish I had a mountain bike equivalent. I just don't right now. But yeah, those are mine. I think the stipend issue is a big one for me.
Thank you, Ross. Amber, Dan, either of you?
I'm fine with the suggestions already made, so nothing else to add.
Okay.
I think the only thing that I would want to touch upon is, I mentioned it, I think in the second session that we had on our budget from last year, was focusing on the revenue, not the expenditures. And so I guess I'd like to get an update as to where we're at in that regards. I know we have a lot of moving parts, and I know that we couldn't focus on trying to align some of our fees and stuff better, and it's obviously not a great time to do it. But remember, I had this discussion a year ago. So trying to focus on getting our fees more aligned with some of the other towns in the area to see some of those revenues come up versus just focusing on the expenditures piece of it.
Thank you, Amber. A couple of things that I had. I believe that this is the year in which our tree farm management plan will be up. And so if there are any implications with the tree farm management plan and ways to help support the maintenance of the tree farm, something to talk about. I've beat this over quite a few times. Local options tax every year. We have gone without it. The local options tax has been over $1 million throughout the entire community that we've left on the table. We could have used to help with the highway tax. We could use it for the housing commission, we could use it for parks, we could use it for trails, we could use it for various opportunities that we're currently leaving on the table. I'd love to explore the capabilities of making permanent mailing out ballots to active voters. The budget implications of that, of course, granted, if we still have that capability. I think this may have been what Raj was alluding to a little bit, for not just the trustees, but for all of our committees and our boards, about ensuring that our volunteers are not necessarily volunteers solely because of their passion, their desires, and their external financial situations. So if we can help out with a overall some types of remuneration for them, and if it's not a per year but rather a per meeting basis, that may help also in terms of allowing people to understand what that ask actually means. And then I think, Amber, what you were saying as well about impact fees, that was the only other note that I had. So for the trustees, I'd say we're done.
I'd like to just emphasize what Andrew said regarding a local option tax. We've talked about it before. We've delayed it for various reasons. It's an opportunity, as he said, to bring in, and as Amber said, to bring in additional revenue. That's not something that a municipality has very often. It's very different now than it was back in 2003, 4, when we first talked about it. We're now one of the only towns in Chittenden County that doesn't do it, or at least the larger towns. So it's different now. And it would alleviate significant tax burdens for residents in the capital department. So I know, Evan, you've considered bringing it to us before. It's been on a agenda item and been as an agenda item and then taken off, and it might be time to reintroduce it more seriously. So, Andy?
I was just going to say, if you're going to have any more conversation about this, I need to recuse myself because I can't participate in discussions about the local options tax.
Understood.
Due to conflict of interest, yeah.
Of course. I think this is simply, maybe it's time to talk about it again. We're not going to talk about it.
I thought you asked Evan for a specific question and he was going to respond. That's why.
Oh, no. I was just going to ask, it's Evan, please bring it out and more formally again. It's time for us to reconsider. That's all.
Looks like the board are done with this item. So if we're good with it, Elaine, I don't know if you want to take it from here. The next two portions are select board only.
Okay.
Public comment. I think there's at least one hand up.
I apologize, I can't see them. So.
Sure. If anyone would like to make a comment regarding budget goals for FY 2023, right? Not 22. No, 22. Pardon me. Please raise your hand or indicate in the chat. Let me get down there. Hold on. Irene.
Hi, everyone. I switched computers. Hopefully you can hear me now.
We can hear you.
Thank you. I would respectfully request that you leave the town outside the village highway budget tax intact, because if the TOV needs extra sidewalk plowing, what better way to pay for it than within that district itself? So yes, the TOV does exist. It is a special taxing district. It has been for 60, 70, 80 years. Why get rid of it now when it sounds like you could use it to do all that extra plowing we need since the school merger took away the buses? Thank you.
Is there anyone else who wishes to speak?
I have to speak. There's an inaccuracy there. The school merger did not take away buses. The busing situation was a result of a lack of qualified employees and CDL drivers. It had nothing to do with the merger whatsoever. If the merger did not happen, then the TOV residents would still have had reduced bus services because, again, it was purely a lack of qualified employees able to run the routes.
Okay. Raj?
I was just going to propose jumping, see if the trustees could approve the consent agenda, since the last few items seem to be select board only.
I would be in favor of that. If we need to, select board, are you okay with continuing on our own and jumping ahead to the consent agenda so that trustees can do theirs? Are you suggesting, Raj, that your meeting ends early?
Well, F and G say select board only, and the consent agenda says trustees only. So I'm thinking we do our consent agenda and go, and you guys continue on your merry way through your executive session, and we think about you fondly.
Godspeed, my friend.
As Belair heads down to rest.
Select board, is that all right with you? Okay. Andrew, do you want to?
Sure. So is there a motion to approve the consent agenda from the trustees?
So I move that we approve. Oh, there you go. Second.
Thank you, Dan. Thank you, Raj. Is there any further discussion on the motion? Hearing none, all those in favor, please signify by saying aye. Aye.
Aye.
Anybody opposed? So trustees, if you'd like to adjourn.
Motion adjourned.
I'm going to say that Raj had the motion. Dan, did you want to second that?
Oh, I'll second it.
All right, George got a second. Any further discussion on adjourning for the trustees?
No, it was a
I'll
great
just-
meeting though, Select Board. Thank you.
Thank you.
I'll just say I plan on sticking around. All those in
Thank you
favor?
all.
All those in favor
Aye.
signify by saying aye. Aye.
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Good night,
And
guys.
Thank you, Select Board.
Anybody opposed? Good night, Select
Good night,
Board. Or good-
trustees.
Thank you, trustees. All right, back up to business item 5F. Approve warning for special town meeting on November 3rd. Evan, go ahead.
I can do this one. It's pretty straightforward. Should be pretty straightforward. The memo, the select board had talked about putting a question on the ballot in November, asking voters if they want to move to Australian ballot budgeting. And so if the select board would like to do that, it requires a special meeting being warned. It's the same day as the November 3rd election that's happening anyways, but just requires a warning from the select board to indicate the question will be on the ballot.
Makes sense to me. Any questions, board members? Andy?
So is this related to the next agenda item, which I'm totally confused about because I got my ballot today and the question's already there?
Can I answer that? Because I researched this because I had the same question.
Please do.
The first part of this is actually not a meeting. It's to actually grant permission to put that ballot item on the ballot. The second one is if we are going to mail it separately, but we don't have to because it's already on the primary, the general election. The next step is, and I need to tell you, the $17,000 where it says postage in the next one needs to be removed because it does not apply to the town.
Right.
I don't know if that helps anybody, but it's just a matter, it's just paperwork to make sure we're legally warning a vote, basically.
So we should still go ahead and vote for the warning, but
Yep.
then have a
That's correct.
separate discussion regarding the mailing
cost.
ballots.
That's correct.
Right, which is why it's two separate agenda items.
Correct.
Okay. So Andy, can you hold your question until the next item and then we'll just take care of this warning first?
I think my other question was answered, that there is no cost. That was my.
Right, so-
Yeah, I'm
The
fine,
state-
and I won't have a question on the next one.
The state took care of the cost this time.
Okay, so are there any further questions regarding the warning of this meeting? All right, then would anyone like to make a motion?
I'll make the motion. I move that the select board warn a special town meeting for November 3rd, 2020.
All right, and a second?
Second.
Thank you, Pat. Any further discussion? All those in favor, please say aye.
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 Opposed? All right, the motion carries. So now 5G, Dawn, you're saying that because we don't have to pay for this cost, this is not something we need to vote on.
There's no cost involved. That's correct.
Yeah. All right.
But do we need to vote on whether to send the ballots?
That's a
'Cause that's-
done deal, Andy. They've already gone.
Yeah, I know, but they've already gone, but okay, so we don't have to do the other one. The other recommendation is that we approve sending the ballots. I know we've already done it, but we've already,
I would go ahead to make it legal. I would still make the motion to send them, but to take out that $17,000.
yeah, it's not actually part of the recommendation, so I think
Correct.
we're good.
It just seems a little backwards to have a vote to send something that has already arrived in everyone's mailboxes.
Right, and we just warned a special meeting, and everybody already has, many people already have their ballots, so yes.
Right, I'm in favor of just tabling this or not even tabling it, but not taking it up.
I'd request that the board make a motion to mail the ballots. That's what the clerk could ask for the motion to send them out, even though they're already out there. It's just the motion is there and then the board has approved it.
It's
Even
a
though the
legal issue.
Even though the Secretary of State sent the ballots and we don't have to do it at all.
Well, it's our meeting, it's our special meeting. So I agree. I'm going to make the motion.
Sure, well, whatever.
I move that the select board approve sending ballots to all active voters for the November 3rd, 2020 election.
Andy, can it be registered voters, not active?
I believe it's active is what the town
Is it
clerk.
active or registered? Because,
Pretty sure it's active.
okay,
Yeah.
sorry, I don't have it in front of me. I don't know. So, okay.
All right, we have
I'll
a motion.
second.
Okay. Any further discussion? All those in favor, please say aye.
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 Aye. Opposed?
Aye.
Okay, we're all set. Next is the reading file, and normally we have a board comments section under this topic as well. So is there any comments from the board on the reading file or anything else? Andy?
The VLCT Town Fair is happening this week. I didn't participate in any of the sessions today, but there are 3 tomorrow that I'm going to attend. There's a select board roundtable at 9 a.m. and then there's 2 others. And I meant to bring the agenda up with me to mention what they were, but I'll be attending those tomorrow and encourage anybody else who's registered to consider attending as well.
Thanks, Andy. Dawn?
I'm not sure, but do we need to hear from the public on that last one? Because I have hands on my screen.
Oh, you do?
Lorraine, I have Lorraine Zaloom
Ah, yeah.
on my screen with her hand up.
Okay. Board members, do you mind if we go back and get some public input on those ballot items? Lorraine, please go ahead.
Sorry, I just, one of the things that Don had noted was that the ballots went out without the district on them, and that they were going to take longer than to go through. So I was just wondering if there's a way to handle that, or
they have been. There is a code on it near the barcode, and that's how they're going to be read, Lorraine.
Oh, perfect. Okay, great.
They're
so I
all
don't have
set.
to worry about adding our district or anything on it to speed it up.
Nope. No.
Perfect. Awesome. Thank you.
Thank you.
My ballot had my district on it. Okay, we'll leave it there. Okay. Other comments? Vince or Pat?
I think one of the last days to register for the census is coming up. So just a reminder to everyone who is stuck around this long, if you haven't done it, it takes like 5 minutes, inspired by watching John Oliver last night, who I think gave a reminder as well. But definitely, if you haven't, please go and register your household for the census. I think it was supposed to end on the 30th. There's some court decisions about whether or not that's going to get extended, but it's for the best if you just go online really quickly and do it. It takes 5 minutes.
Thanks, Pat. And thanks also for representing the board at last week's policy meeting at the VLCT. And I also encourage all of you, whoever can, to go to the VLCT webinars this week for the town fair. I'll be moderating tomorrow's select board roundtable along with 2 other select board members, or a town clerk and a select board member. And there's several other great sessions in the rest of the week, so I highly recommend that folks attend if they can. It's free this year, so it's not too late to sign up.
Well, now I'm going to show up to embarrass you, Elaine.
And there's very little travel involved in this one.
Very little
I
travel.
had planned on showing up anyway, but now I just have a bonus.
Now you're gonna. Also, no hotel food. Okay, so the last thing remaining on our agenda is an executive session. So I believe we have a motion to make, and then we'll go into executive session. There's a separate link that Travis sent to us earlier this evening, and then we will return. Do we have any further business to do afterwards, or can we adjourn immediately after, Evan?
Adjourn immediately after.
Okay, so we won't be coming back to this space then?
Nope.
Okay,
So I have the motion up.
thank you, Andy.
I move that the select board enter into executive session to discuss the employment of a public employee in accordance with 1 VSA section 313A3 and to include the unified manager, deputy manager, police chief, and human resources director.
Thank you. Is there a second?
Second.
All right, any further discussion?
Can I just, I'm not sure because of all the computer trouble, I have a link to go to executive session here.
Yeah, I don't think I do either.
Did you get an email from Travis during the meeting? Could you check?
No.
I did not.
Okay.
Once you get in
Travis?
there, I can invite you in, Andy and
Okay.
Yeah, I did. I sent it, I think, a good hour after the meeting started. I noticed there wasn't one. I double checked. You are all on there, but we can invite anyone who's not able to get in.
So folks should just stay where they are and you'll pull them in?
Yeah.
Okay. All right, would everyone like to vote? All those in favor?
Aye.
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 Opposed? Okay, we will enter executive session. Thank you, members of the public, for joining us this evening.
Thank you, guys.